Good evening and welcome. This is a public hearing of the Zoning Board of Appeals of the City of Evanston. The zoning ordinance directs this body to hear applications for major variations, special uses, and appeals from the decisions of the zoning administrator. Depending on the type of matter, this board will either make a final determination or send its recommendation to City Council. Melissa, will you please call the roll?
Lisa Deacon.
Here.
Scott Gingold.
Here.
Mary Beth Burns.
Here.
Violetta Cullen.
Present.
Mirna Aravalo. Kirill Miranchev.
Here.
And Mary McCauley.
With 5 members present, we do have a quorum tonight. Also present tonight are zoning planner Melissa Klotz and planning and zoning administrator Scott Mangum. Oh, and Mario Tretto. Sorry. Assistant City Attorney Mario Tretto. This is a formal meeting, and there are rules that govern our proceedings. Most importantly, only one person speaks at a time so that all testimony may be accurately recorded. Anyone who wishes to address the board regarding any matter on the agenda will have the opportunity to do so at the appropriate time. Our procedure is to hear from the staff on the documents on file and then receive testimony and other evidence from the applicant or appellant. Next, persons who wish to make a statement regarding the matter may do so at that time. Any person with a legal interest in property located within 500 feet of the subject property may present evidence, reasonably question witnesses, or seek a continuance of the hearing. While all supporting and opposing testimony and statements have been heard, the applicant or appellant will be given the opportunity for rebuttal or a closing statement. Then, the board will close the record and begin deliberations. All testimony will be under oath. Although we do not apply the strict rules of evidence, please limit your testimony or statement to your personal knowledge. When you address the board, please state your name and address and sign in on the provided sheet. Our meetings are audio and video recorded. Please make sure that you are at a microphone when asking questions or making statements so that they can be properly recorded. All proceedings are subject to broadcast at a later date. Any matter not concluded at tonight's hearing will be continued to our next regularly scheduled meeting. There are 3 items on the agenda tonight, and I don't have an agenda handy. Oh, look, I do have one. So there's 1723 Simpson Street. Is that applicant here? Awesome. How about 2014 Orrington? Is that applicant here? Excellent. And 2626 Reese, are you here? Great. So everyone is here. And so the first item on the agenda is the meeting minutes. I'll get to it. Is the meeting minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review those meeting minutes?
Yes.
Are there any changes? Is there a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? And the minutes are approved. Okay. Next, before we get into the first case, I'm going to ask everyone who is planning on testifying tonight. So if you're coming up and planning on speaking, I need you to raise your right hand. Everybody. And do you swear or affirm to tell the truth throughout the course of these proceedings?
I do.
Fantastic. All right, we're going to start with Scott's going to start with 1723 Simpson Street. So if you can read the case into the record, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, members of the public. The request tonight on this first item at 1723 Simpson Street is for a special use permit by Robert Creighton, potential lessee, for a Type 2 restaurant, Ruby's, within the B1 zoning district. This is an item where the zoning board makes a recommendation to the City Council, who's the determining body. The Design and Project Review Committee has already reviewed and made a recommendation on this matter. There was a recommendation for approval subject to conditions. Those conditions are that removal of bars and the glass block windows on the south-facing facade and replacing those with transparent glass, prohibiting delivery times when school buses pick up in front of the location, providing updated plans and description of operations for Phase 1 and 2 of the operation, and requiring that a second accessible restroom is installed prior to Phase 2 operations. Those are operations, as the applicant may describe, where there would be more than 10 occupants in the building, which necessitates the requirement for the 2 accessible restrooms. The zoning board may consider enhancing or adding conditions or clarifying these conditions regarding the unobstructed windows, specific delivery hours that would be permitted, and interior signage relating to the maximum occupancy without a second accessible restroom. That concludes a summary of the staff recommendation. We're available for questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Clayton, if you'd like to come up and tell us a bit about your project, please. And if you wouldn't mind starting with your name and address, please.
My name is Robert Creighton. Address 1838 Hoveland Court. That's home or restaurant?
The home's fine.
Home, yep. 1838 Hoveland Court.
Thank you. So go ahead and
Oh,
tell
okay.
us about your project.
Well, our project is, it's on 1723 Simpson. We took an abandoned building, and we decided to open the restaurant back up that was there before. It also was a grocery store. We took the grocery store out of the restaurant, and that's what the special use is for. We're doing it in two different phases. The first phase is just type 2 restaurant, no more than 10 people, no more than 10 seats at a time. And then the second phase will be the special use phase, and that's when we can use the bigger side of the restaurant.
Do they have to come back for phase 2?
They would need to comply with everything as described here. So if they describe the phase 2 and they provide additional seating, more than 10 people, then that's where that second accessible restroom would come in.
Okay.
If it's described here as having special events in the application, then it would be included as part of this.
Okay.
Is phase 2 a type 1 restaurant or is phase
No,
2?
it's still a type 2 restaurant.
So can you descriptively, other than the number of occupants, can you describe what the difference between phases 1 and 2 will be?
Phases 2 allow us to have more than 10 people, basically. We can only have 10 seats, I'm sorry. We can only have 10 seats without using the phase 2, and that's the handicap accessible washroom, without putting a second handicap accessible washroom.
So is the entire reason for having 2 phases to avoid putting the money into putting another bathroom in there right now?
Yeah, we're not avoiding it. We just don't have the money to put it in right now. We're trying to get capital, and then we're going to add the second
So
washroom.
what's the anticipated timing for that?
Truthfully, we really don't have a date. We want to do it within 2 years, but we really don't have a date. I'm sorry.
Begin phase 2 within 2 years, you're saying?
Yes.
Is it envisioned that it would be takeout service during both phase 1 and phase 2? Or
Yes.
does so the service delivery
Yes.
doesn't change?
No, service, no.
And do you know whether the owner of the space has applied for the grant application with the city? I understand from the DAPR report that the owner was going to apply for a grant application
Yeah, no,
to replace some of the glass blocks and other improvements to the storefront. Has that happened yet?
That's correct. Yes, he is, but the problem is we didn't get the 3 bids yet. So we're waiting on the 3 bids. Yeah.
You have no problem complying with the recommendations, recommended conditions that DAPR recommended?
No.
So, Mr. Creighton, this restaurant, Ruby's,
Yes.
the name of it, could you describe the type of restaurant and what are your hours? Will you serve 3 meals? And how is it just carry out in the beginning, or is it carry out and counter service?
It's carry out counter service. Like we said, we can't have no more than 10 seats. The restaurant will be serving breakfast and lunch. We want to open, phase 1, we want to open from like 7 to 3. No more than 4 to 5 staff. Gonna keep it small and try to keep it quick.
So when you move into phase 2, will you add a dinner service? Is that your plan?
We would like to. I'm not for sure. We would like to. We would like to.
But right now, your entire bottom line is about breakfast and lunch,
Yes.
7 a.m. to 3,
Yes.
counter service takeout, and 10 stools.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Just to clarify, the building code limitations on the occupancy of 10, so it would include staff.
Do you understand that
So-
it's not 10 seats, it's 10 people in the building?
Okay. Yeah.
Including how many people on
Cooks.
staff at once?
Maybe 2.
Like the cook and yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
So how will you bring deliveries to the restaurant, and how you deal with the garbage?
The garbage, he could pull in the back. Well, it's really not the back; it's the side of the building. The curb is already. A truck can pull behind the building. The garbage truck can pull behind the building. That's what he's been doing for the grocery store. So we're going to continue to do that. We plan on having deliveries after school hours. I know that was one of the stimulants that we had. We couldn't deliver during when the buses are for school for the kids.
So your deliveries, I understand this will be a truck that will stop on the street.
Yes.
How much time will this take?
It's a small van, no more than 15, 20 minutes. We won't be able. We're not gonna stock food, so we might only have.
What will be the deliveries that you have? Mainly, are these boxes, frozen food?
Yep, correct.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
So just to clarify, are you planning to have deliveries on Emerson or around the corner through the side entrance?
Not on
Sorry,
Emerson,
Simpson.
Simpson.
Sorry.
Simpson.
Yep, Simpson.
Yep.
So you intend to have them on the main street. Is there a possibility? Tell me why you're not trying to get those deliveries on the side street.
We can. I think the first meeting they kind of said in front of the building, but the back is even better for me. It's like almost a loading dock there. It's like the doors open.
Right, because
wider.
when I look at the
Yeah.
plan, right, there's a little bit of a backyard,
Yeah.
and my guess is backyard really means pavement,
Yes.
that there's no grass there.
No grass.
And so there is a door there, so it seems
Yes.
logical that you could just back the truck
Yeah.
up there and to do all deliveries off street.
Yeah.
So is that reasonable? Is that a reasonable condition?
It's better for us. Yes.
Fantastic. So
Yeah.
we can take on street side deliveries off the table.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yep.
When I look at this floor plan, I see things like fish fryers and chicken fryers.
Right.
I didn't see that in your menu of what you were proposing to serve.
Yeah, but that's before I knew what I was buying. So I wasted a lot of money.
What does that? Tell me what that means.
I mean, I wasted a lot of money buying stuff that I really didn't need. So hopefully,
Oh, so you own them, but you don't really want them.
yeah, I really want them.
Okay.
We doing breakfast, so
Okay.
I talked to a couple chefs and they was like, "Oh, you need this, you need this, you need this," and we went and bought everything they said we needed.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So is the plan to expand into those sorts of fried foods? Because if you're serving not just breakfast, but you're serving lunch too, right?
Yeah, lunch is more like sandwiches. We do have a deli counter there, so it's more like sandwiches, salads, soups.
Okay. So somebody told you to buy a fryer and you bought it, but you're not planning on using it.
Yeah, because there was already one there.
Okay.
And he's like, "You need the same thing that's already there."
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And are you aware of the City of Evanston sustainability practices and what's required of you as a Type 1 restaurant? Or Type 2, sorry.
No, I mean, I don't think I'm.
I don't see that signed. Oh, sorry, I don't see that signed. The sustainability about the litter collection and all that good stuff.
I don't believe we've received a copy of the sustainability plan from the applicant to this point.
Okay. So would you mind telling him what's on that so he can agree to that?
It's a checklist, essentially, that we can get you. There are a number of items on there, including a litter collection plan, recycling of materials,
Oh, yeah, I think we did
the type of whether you're serving food, if it were to be sit down or people eating there, whether that would be provided on non-disposable materials.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to try again on the phase 1, phase 2 thing to
Yes.
understand if is there any difference between phase 1 and phase 2 other than the number of people you'll have on site? Or is the distinction really just about the bathroom and the number of people?
Yes.
The menu's not going to change
Not-
in any planned way.
We don't think so. We don't
Okay.
think so.
The seating. So, to me, that seems like a compliance issue that doesn't really necessitate consideration by us. It has to be, if we were to grant the special use, the use has to be ADA compliant. So phase 1 or phase 2, if he doesn't have the second bathroom, he can't have more than 10 people on site, whether we condition it or not.
Right.
Okay, well,
Do you anticipate using the sidewalk for tables outside?
No, not now. No.
Do you anticipate some awnings?
Awnings? Yeah, not the first phase. Not first phase. I know we had to run it back by you guys, you said, so no, not first phase. First phase, we're just trying to get open. We need to make some money.
is there any parking, non-street parking that comes with the
Nah. No.
lease?
Well, it's like one for me, for my vehicle, but not for the restaurant, no.
And that's the one vehicle is not on the street. Where's that parking space?
In the back of the building where the garbage and food will be delivered.
Have you ever run a restaurant before?
No, I have not.
Okay.
It scares me.
Okay. Do you want to tell us a little bit about why you decided to open a restaurant here?
I really didn't decide to open a restaurant. The restaurant came with the building, and we figured that that's going to make all the money. So,
Okay.
when I got this project, I got it for the special use. That's something I enjoyed. I like getting groups together. That's something that I wanted to do. The restaurant was a plus, so we're using the restaurant.
Okay. So your primary interest in the property is really what comes along with Phase 2, which is being
Phase 2.
able to have larger groups of people congregate there and have
Community.
that be fully compliant with 2 ADA bathrooms.
Yes,
That's the real goal.
real goal. Yeah, I'm aiming for more community. Yeah.
Okay.
The restaurant is, like I said, the restaurant was a plus. The restaurant will pay the bills because the special use won't. We know that.
Right, because your intention is not to charge entry
Yeah.
fees
Yeah,
to
we're
a
not doing that.
community,
Yeah,
a community gathering place.
right.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Creighton, is your background in community?
I worked for the city a couple of years. Yeah.
And with that neighborhood in particular? Is that why?
Yeah, that's my neighborhood. I love that neighborhood.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my neighborhood.
Are there any other questions from anyone else?
No.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anybody here who would like to speak on this project? Anyone? All right. No other public comments. So we're going to take that as being the end of Mr. Creighton's presentation. So with that, we will go ahead and close the record and enter into the deliberations. So thoughts from the board? Anyone?
I'll just reiterate the thought. I don't think we need to really establish a condition based on the Phase 1 and Phase 2 distinction because I think that's a legal compliance issue. He's either going to have the second bathroom and be allowed to have the more than 10 people on site, or he's not. But that's not something that the special use should ride on one way or the other, in my view. On the other hand, the plans seem to be fairly loose at this point, in my view. And while I don't think that's necessarily a reason not to grant the special use, it does give me a little bit of pause.
I would agree with Scott. I think that special use is a special use. We decide to grant it or not, and I would say that my vote is yes.
I like the idea that a restaurant is going back in this space. I know that the last couple of uses have been a grocery store, and that hasn't been the best use for this corner. And so something more community-oriented, like a restaurant by somebody who's community-oriented and a resident, would be a great use of this space.
Well, I applaud the applicant for his desire to find a reuse for that site. I don't know how long that site has been vacant, but certainly having a use that serves the community would be a positive. I'm reviewing the DAPR conditions, and I wanted to clarify a couple of things. So, if as the applicant said, that delivery could happen on the side street, I think that's Darrow right there,
The applicant said that it could happen off-street.
off Simpson.
No, off-street.
Oh,
Off Darrow, pulling up to the back.
Off-street. So
Yeah,
it's
off the street.
So you could pull that truck into what's labeled the backyard space.
So that's even better. So
Yes.
then can we don't have to, I think we could strike that condition where we would be coordinating delivery with school bus pickup and
Yes.
drop off times. So that's, in my view, taken off the table. And then I'm wondering in regards to the windows along Simpson Street to be placed with transparent glass. I think that's an important matter. It was important before DAPR. I agree with that. I'm wondering if we might want to add as a condition that the grant application at least be received by the city so that we see some traction in that direction to actually be able to see that so that I don't know that we can condition it on the city offering the grant, but at least we see that there is some traction in the applicant, the owner of the building, making efforts to find capital to make that happen. I throw it out for discussion.
I happen to agree with that as well. I think that's a good incentive to keep the forward momentum for this project and the redevelopment of it. So I think that's a good idea.
I agree with you, Lisa, because I feel like it would make the entire project much more community friendly.
Mm-hmm.
The glass block was very imposing when you couldn't see inside that building.
I agree. That's a good note. Thanks.
Okay. I happen to agree with all of you about this. As you know, I was a fan of the restaurant down the street, and I'm a fan of this one as well. I think revitalization of the neighborhood is important, and getting people to be in these buildings and to use them is an important facet of the neighborhood. So I love the redevelopment of this property. I love even more getting rid of those glass block windows because I find them very imposing, and having regular glass there will be great. So I think it's a good project. I'm eager for phase 2. So I hope that this phase 1 is very successful for you. So with that, we are going to go through the 9 standards of special use, if I can find them. Okay. It is one of the special uses specifically listed in the zoning ordinance, and a type 2 is, sorry. Number 2, it's in keeping with the purposes and policies of the adopted comprehensive general plan and the zoning ordinance as amended from time to time. Certainly, the comprehensive plan is geared to promote growth and redevelopment to strengthen the overall economic base of Evanston, and certainly by providing some jobs to the neighborhood and to provide a place for the neighborhood to go, I think certainly achieves that goal. So that standard has been met. Number 3, it will not cause a negative cumulative effect when its effect is considered in conjunction with the cumulative effect of various special uses of all types on the immediate neighborhood and the effect of the proposed type of special use upon the city as a whole. If I remember reading correctly in the documents, the applicant considers that the bulk of their traffic will be walking. And this is one special use in a neighborhood that doesn't have a lot of special uses, but I do think that use of a restaurant will be helpful in that neighborhood. So I do believe that standard has been met. Number 4, it does not interfere with or diminish the value of the property in the neighborhood. In fact, renovation to that property and getting that property inhabited will actually give more vitality to the street and increase the property values in the immediate vicinity. So that standard has been met. Number 5, it can be adequately served by public facilities and services. It is already served by City of Evanston services and facilities, so that standard has been met. Number 6, it does not cause undue traffic congestion. Again, the point that the applicants indicated was that the bulk of traffic will be local and from the neighborhood, so we're expecting that most of that will be walking or biking traffic, and so I do not believe that traffic congestion will increase, so that standard has been met. Number 7, it preserves significant historical and architectural resources. Although not historical, there are architectural resources of a perfectly good building that could use a little attention to it, and so I think that that standard has certainly been met. Number 8, it preserves significant natural and environmental features, which does not apply. And 9, it will comply with all other applicable regulations of the district in which it's located and other applicable ordinances. So I do believe that that standard has been met too. So we are a recommending body to the City Council. There are, can I have that back for a second? Thanks. There are a couple of conditions, right? One is the transparent glass with an application to the Economic Board, Economic Development for that grant. 2, that delivery is now off-street, and in fact, it is literally off-street. 3, that employees cannot park on the street, and they will be parking elsewhere. Hours, so the hours we gave to the restaurant down the street are 10:30 to 8:30. Does that seem correct?
No. He's
Okay.
seeking 7 a.m., right?
Okay, so do you
I
want to
would
go
say 6.
6 to 8:30?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that the restaurant down the street had a dinner service, so I do believe it was a little later.
Okay.
Yes, I do believe they were having
I
a
would say
dinner.
6 to 10, if that's appropriate.
6 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Yeah.
Okay. 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week. Anything else? Litter collection, all that good stuff, right?
Is the removal of
Sorry.
the bars part of the windows, part of the
Facade
replace?
improvement?
Yeah, is it one and the same?
Yes. But feel free to be clear. And were there any other conditions?
Sure. Just a couple notes or suggestions for the
Yeah.
board to consider regarding conditions. With the transparent windows, it may be good to have some additional details. Sometimes we see windows and then become tinted or obstructed with shelving or obstructed with blinds or other methods. So it might be prudent to put something in the condition about not having those windows obstructed. To consider maybe limiting the delivery location was described, but maybe the hours being the proximity to residential.
But if it's off street, do we really
So it's not 3 in the morning.
care? Okay.
Yeah, because that rear location is adjacent to a residence.
Okay.
Correct. So that was another one. And then I understand the concern about the occupancy limitations being a building code matter for enforcement. But sometimes we find that can be easier enforced if there was maybe signage interior that limited the occupancy of that, just to kind of reinforce that, months or years in the future that there is that limitation there of the 10 occupants.
Doesn't strike me that that's necessary. It's a legal compliance issue. Right? If they have more than 10 people in the building, whether they have a sign or not, it's a violation if they don't have the second bathroom.
I happen to agree with Scott. I mean, I don't know how you're going to stop it. I don't know how you're going to enforce it anyhow. So, I don't know what anybody's going to do about it.
I think the suggestion of requiring that glass to be transparent is a good one. That's the point of removing the blocks to begin with, right?
But it's not only transparent, but that it also not be obscured in any
Right.
any manner on the
Unobstructed.
inside. Yeah. And then, what do we want to limit delivery hours to, since it's adjacent to residential? Do you want to go business hours, 9 to 5?
I think during operation hours is fine.
Okay.
It is B1. It's not like we're
Operation hours are 6,
6 to 10.
6 to 10 p.m.
so the city's noise ordinance is 7 to 7.
Okay.
Just putting it out there.
I like the idea of noise ordinance of 7 to 7. That makes some logic there. There's some logic to that. Do you guys have thoughts?
Only that we never ever set hours of delivery, and if the noise ordinance is 7 to 7, then the noise ordinance prohibits a
Governs.
noisy delivery from 6 to 7
Yes.
without having to limit the deliveries during outside of those periods.
I agree with you.
So what did we just agree to?
I don't know that we need to set hours of delivery is all I said.
Okay.
Right, because the city noise ordinance will prevail.
Okay. All right. Who wants to make that motion, please?
Who's got an agenda? I'll second it.
I make a motion in the matter of 1723 Simpson Street, ZBA item 17ZMJV-0103, that we recommend approval to City Council with the following conditions: that the bars be removed and the glass block windows be replaced with transparent and unobstructed windows, that deliveries take place at the rear of the building and off-street, that a grant application has been received by the appropriate city staff and committees for review for storefront improvements, that operation hours be limited from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., and that the sustainability plan for Evanston be signed and received as required by staff, and that all testimony and documents received and heard here this evening are accurate.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded.
Let me just add, I don't know that you said the parking. Employees need to use off-street parking.
Good addition.
Friendly amendment. Okay. You accept that friendly amendment?
Indeed.
Excellent.
And I second it.
Nice. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? So with a vote of 5-0, you go to City Council with a recommendation for approval. Good luck with your project. Okay. Moving on to 2014 Orrington Avenue. Melissa, will you please read that into the record?
So I need to recuse
yep.
myself.
All
This is a project of our company, so I have to recuse myself.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rabbi Dov Hillel Klein, property owner, applies for a special use permit for the expansion of a religious institution, Lubavitch Chabad of Evanston, LLC, in the R1 Single Family Residential District, zoning code section 6824. The applicant also requests major zoning relief for an addition including a third story with a 35-foot peak height and exterior knee wall above 3 feet, where 2.5 stories with a peak height of 35 feet and a maximum 3-foot knee wall are permitted. Zoning code sections 6829A and 6183. A 5.4-foot north interior side yard setback and 9.5-foot south interior side yard setback, where 15 feet is required for a non-residential structure. Zoning code section 6828B3. A 27.3-foot front yard setback where 34 feet is required, zoning code section 6419A3, and a 24.8-foot front yard porch eave setback where 27.6 feet is required, zoning code section 6419B. The Zoning Board of Appeals makes a recommendation to City Council, the determining body for this case. Documents included as part of the record include special use and variation application submitted February 17, 2017, operations summary, zoning analysis, plat of survey, site plan, floor plans, shadow study, elevations, renderings, photographs of neighborhood, proposed conditions submitted by neighbors, Appellate Court of Illinois decision, 1978 special use ordinance, image of property, aerial view of property, zoning map of property, Preservation Commission meeting minutes excerpts of August 29, 2017, October 17, 2017, and November 14, 2017. Dapper draft meeting minutes excerpt of January 3rd, 2018, as well as 3 letters that were handed out at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, so who's going to present this case? 2014 Orrington Avenue. Come on up. Then if you could start by giving us your name and address, please. Thank you.
My name is Rabbi Dov Hillel Klein. I personally live at 2019 Maple, Evanston, Illinois. First and foremost, I want to wish everyone a Happy New Year's. I'm just delighted that everyone's willing to hear our case. 40 years ago, we stood before this commission to ask for zoning variance to open a place of worship, a synagogue, and ministry in order to service the residents in the city of Evanston, as well as Northwestern University, students, faculty, and staff. The ZBA granted the various zoning variances. Unfortunately, the City Council did not agree and refused to grant us a special use permit. That forced our parent organization to take the city to court for being discriminative. After all, right next door to us was which still exists till this day, was the Episcopalian Center. Down the block was the Lutheran Center, and the block away was a new finished dormitory called Foster Walker Complex. Chabad won that case, but the city kept appealing it until it reached the Supreme Court of the United States. The Supreme Court upheld the lower court decision case, number 81-633. So we operate today based on the court ruling and the ZBA special use provisions. As we stand before you today, we are not asking to change those provisions, but to keep them the same and in place. Today we are asking for other variances so we can enhance our building, make it more usable, presentable, safer, handicap accessible, and meet all the ADA requirements. After the Supreme Court granted us our ability to open our doors, I was hired in 1985, 32 years ago. I feel like I've been here forever. And we built a wonderful community. And we have had wonderful impact on thousands of young adults who are now leaders throughout the country in their own cities and towns. Over the years, we have aided NU students with services, fellowship, counseling, mentoring, and a variety of educational programs. We have a small but very close-knit adult community who join us daily for prayers, classes, and holiday celebrations. We also have a Hebrew club and programs for what we consider the more secular Jewish community. In addition, we engage in a variety of interfaith programs and work with all the segments of the city's population. I had the privilege to create, and I'm still very active in the police clergy program, one of the most successful programs in the country, which services our police officers and our citizens in times of crisis. Over the past 8 years, we have had the opportunity to hire 2 additional rabbis and their wives, whom are engaging with the community and students in amazing ways throughout Evanston. That being said, for the past 25 years, we have realized that we need to redo and reshape our facility. First of all, we need to be handicap accessible. We need an elevator to get our aging members onto the additional floors. We need ADA bathrooms to secure the dignity of our participants. We need a safe egress to exit the building in case of emergencies. Today, we have a winding staircase. Very dangerous, God forbid if there was a fire. We need a kitchen that can prepare meals, and in the Jewish community, this space needs to be large enough for a meat kitchen, a dairy kitchen, and a Passover kitchen. We desperately need office spaces. Today, there is none to be able to sit and meet with a congregant and have a private conversation. We need 2 classrooms for our Hebrew club and study groups. We need a meditation space and a place to network and just the ability to come and chill in an appropriate setting. We need a chapel that feels comfortable, roomy, and gives off a pleasant spiritual vibe. All of the above takes up space. We are not looking to increase numbers. Our programs are very staggered in time. We have been operating for 40 years. After these renovations, we plan to remain forever. Our primary ministry is to the students of Northwestern, and as long as Northwestern University is here, we will be here. And as far as I know, Northwestern has no plans of leaving Evanston, and neither do we. As I said, we have wanted to expand for the past 25 years. We raised enough capital funds to do an addition, and we came in front of this body in 2010 to add a 30-foot addition onto the back of the building. Even though we were confident that we would succeed and win the approval, the opposition from some of the neighbors and the bulkiness of the building, we decided to withdraw our application and figure something else out. 8 years later, and after doubling our contributions, we came up with the idea, instead of going backwards, to go upwards. We hired our architect and we created a design that would give us the space we need with minimal intrusion on the neighborhood. The current design will not be a full story and will be hidden behind existing parapet walls, removing part of the front facade to reduce bulk and to blend in with the residential environment. Since a year ago, December, we have made 17 different renderings to accommodate most of the needs of our neighbors. We solicited input privately from neighbors as well as many interested parties. We then had 2 neighborhood meetings. We presented for 3 months in front of the Historical Preservation Committee and made additional changes to the design to accommodate all their needs. It passed in front of the Historical District 7-1. We also had several meetings with the building department staff throughout the process. And last week, DAPR approved our project 8-0. At this time, the overwhelming majority of the neighbors appreciate what Chabad does and sees us as important and good neighbors. Their concerns have been in the look and shape of the building. They wanted it to be more residential look, and we've come to a great balance of a residential look with a taste of a synagogue. Their other concern is that once we do our project, that we don't leave, which we do not plan on it. In addition, all of the concerns neighbors have signed off on us moving forward and getting the variances so we can continue with the project. Therefore, at this point, we come in front of you for your approval. 3 of the variances we need to ask you for are already grandfathered in. We need a variance from the commercial side, setback both to the north and the south. Those are 2 variances. Our existing building has a smaller setback, a front setback, than the average of the neighboring residences, even though the 2 homes on our immediate south also have the same smaller front setback, similar to ours. In addition, we decided to remove several feet from our existing building on the 2nd floor. By doing so, this will take away the bulkiness of the building, and visually it will feel as if the building doesn't go out so far. This removal of part of the building will help give a much more residential feel. The top of our building will not exceed 35 feet. Even though our neighbors to the immediate north is 40 feet, others are 42 and 48 feet, and the apartments or dorms are even higher. That being said, in order to have usable space, we are asking for the variance that the knee wall begin at 7.5 feet and not at the traditional 3 feet, which is part of the ordinance. Another variance is the eave in front of the building. In order to look and fit with the eaves on the entire block, we needed to extend the eave another 2.5 feet. The result blends the character of our synagogue with the home feeling of the neighborhood residential environment. Thank you for your time, and I pray that you'll be able to recommend our project to the City Council.
Thank you. Questions from the board?
Rabbi, do you live in the building?
No, I live on 2019 Maple. The building is 2014 Orrington. Currently, there's nobody living in the building.
And that's not the plan?
The plan is, we don't have any plans for anyone living in the building, but part of our original zoning, when I first came, part of the original zoning back 40 years ago, there was going to be a resident rabbi living in the building. I lived there from the first 5 years of occupancy. We have not removed that from the special use because in case of emergency, we want to make sure we're able to operate. You know, if there's a fire, if there's a reason that one of our 3 rabbis' facility goes down, I want them to be able to have a temporary place. I thought it was a great accommodation initially. Many synagogues and churches throughout Evanston has some sort of parish associated with it. But the actual space for the living dwelling has been removed from the future plans. So it's not there.
Okay. And my other question is, other than the eave change, will this change the building's footprint in any way?
No.
Okay.
The footprint is staying the same.
Okay.
That was because of, in 2010, the strong emphasis, also from some of the members on this commission, I remember, was like, hey, what are you going back for? And therefore we can't, to go up is so much more expensive. But it's been 8 years and we've been able to raise those funds, so we're excited about being able now to go up and really make it happen.
Right. Okay, thank you.
I just want to confirm, one of the original conditions on the special use was that the premises be limited to a maximum of 30 persons or lesser.
That's correct. That's staying. That's been there for the last 40 years.
So the expanded space does not require a change in that limitation from the existing special use?
No.
Okay.
And did I understand correctly that the programming that occurs inside will not change substantially given the change in the building?
No, I mean, right now we are setting up taking down areas. Right now we don't, I mean, the main reason for, one of the main reasons is because we don't have ADA bathrooms. We don't have, a wheelchair can't get into the building. And if it got into the building, there's no way for it to go down the hallways. All that takes up now more space. So in order to accommodate that and to be able to have some office space, we have a Hebrew school club, there's 15 young children. Right now they're meeting in a place that's would be considered like your dining room. They need a proper classroom. For education, you need a proper classroom. I give a class in the evening. I give classes most evenings. We need a proper classroom in order to be able to give those classes. And today we don't have it. So this would really enhance our programming qualitatively. And that's what we're looking to do.
And can you please describe the process that has resulted in the neighbors signing off on the letter that we received this evening? I've met with some of those neighbors privately, going all the way back to a year ago. Then we had public meetings to include more members of the community. We've kept up the conversation, myself and them, and amongst themselves. They spoke amongst themselves. What are the things that they're really interested in? And therefore, from our original design, which was looked more of a synagogue than it did as a residence. Today it looks more like a residence than a synagogue. That was important to them, and we wanted to meet their needs because we're great neighbors and we love them, and we want to make sure that they were happy, and we're trying to do whatever we can to satisfy them and yet still have a place that really feels comfortable for people to come to.
I think what my fellow board member was asking about are the list of agreed special use conditions that we were presented with, whether there was some sort of concession that Chabad made in order to gain the approval of the neighbors.
I did not make any concessions. The concession that I made, which is not really a concession, I don't like the word concession. The conversation back and forth that we made was an extra paragraph. There's an extra paragraph that talks about not using it as a daycare center, not using it as a B&B, not using it as a hotel space or something of that nature. I don't have the wording in front of me. So that's being added, which it wasn't in the original document from 40 years ago. But that's automatic anyway within city. So it's not something additional. It's something that we would be abiding by anyway.
Yep.
So it wasn't a compromise in any shape or fashion. We had no intention of turning it into a B&B or a daycare center or a residential center for other people. But what's important, I think, is that our neighbors understand that we're on the same page with them. So it was really wonderful that we were able to have those conversations.
Thanks. I wasn't implying anything.
No, I'm for sure not. I just,
I do think it's
language is.
I do think it's lovely that you've worked with your neighbors both on the design and on the conditions of special use throughout the process.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions for you, which I'm guessing your architect's going to be more qualified to answer.
I don't know if he's allowed to. I'll try my best.
He's allowed to speak.
Oh.
So one of the conditions of a variance, right, is that the hardship is specific to the property, not to the users of the property and not to the use of the property, but to the property. So can you talk a little bit about
I don't understand your question.
that?
I'm sorry. Can you?
So, sure. So
what do you mean by hardship to the property?
So number 3, as a standard for a major variation, is that the alleged hardship or practical difficulty is peculiar to the property. Those are the reasons. That's a reason why we grant variances, because there is a hardship that makes it impossible for you to comply with zoning requirements, and that hardship be unique to the property. So if 100 properties in Evanston all have the same difficulty, it's not a unique situation. So I'm asking about that specifically in relationship to the height of the knee wall on the 3rd floor. What is,
I'm going to let him.
Right.
It's beyond my,
So-
it's above my pay grade. I'm
Yep.
sorry.
so Carol, first I'm going to have you raise your right hand. And do you swear or affirm to tell the truth throughout the course of these proceedings?
I do.
Thank you. If you give us your name and address, please.
Kirill Marinchev, 3309 Simpson Street, Evanston.
So can you address that for me? Which is what hardship specific to the property is requiring you to ask for a variance for the third floor?
The specific things for the property mainly is the institutional use of the property, and that's the specific thing. It was once built as a residence, and after that converted to institutional use, and existed in such status for about 45 years. So the special use requested is because of need of additional space, and it immediately triggers the special use requirement, the special use request tonight. So this is the main thing in this regard, because institutional setbacks in a residential lot are much bigger than the usual residential setbacks, which are 5 feet, and in our case, the requirement is 15 feet.
Right. So my concern isn't so much about the setbacks, right? Because that's something we typically allow, right, is which you to go above the existing floor plan. It's really about that height of that knee wall. So even if this was new construction for an institutional use, an allowed use in an R1 district, you would still be held to the 3-foot knee wall.
Correct.
Tell me why a 7-foot knee wall that isn't specific to the way that they want to use the property.
Well,
Why is that where's the hardship for that?
Well, if you speaking, let's say, only architecturally, the parapet wall, as defined in the city ordinance, is a little bit than 3 feet right now, and it is the same one. It is not increased. We are adding exterior walls that are 1.5 feet pushed back from the parapet walls, and these walls are 7.5 feet. And we think that this is the minimal height that can grant the owner reasonable interior space, and it is almost invisible from the pedestrian view because it's pushed back. That's how we do it. Why do we need it? Because we need more space.
No, I understand that. So, for example, imagine that you were not an institutional use, but you were a developer of the same property, and you came to me telling me that, but I need that space up there because it improves my marketability. Is that a hardship that we would normally grant?
Well, I would probably not come with a demand to gain certain profits from the building. You know that this is not.
No, I understand. I understand that.
But the only way that we can give the synagogue the additional space they need, we found out that's the best way, and in my opinion, that's the minimum variance that we can ask for.
So another question is, tell me the other options you looked at
Sure.
to keep that knee wall at 3 feet. Because you could go with dormers on the sides, right? Also, there are other options and other mechanisms.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about that.
So we started this project with the concept that you are mentioning now, with keeping the parapet walls
Yeah.
and adding dormers. And adding dormers in less than the percentage than the zoning ordinance allows. The moment we presented it on one of the first meetings with the staff, they considered this a full floor that we have to.
With zoning staff?
Yes.
Okay.
That we have to apply for zoning variance as for a full floor. And we decided that if we do the variance for a full floor, then we can apply with the 7-foot pushed back walls so that we give the reasonable space to the synagogue. So this was the start of the project, and that's why we're applying now for this variance, because this was considered a floor.
Okay. Melissa, can you speak to that a little bit? Because I'm not following how, if you went with dormers on the side, how did that kick them into the concept of an entire third floor versus the half story?
I think the first proposal that we saw, that we went over, there were dormers proposed, but by zoning definitions, they were not considered dormers. We consider a dormer to be an opening to accommodate a window, and it was slightly more than a window. So in order to actually be dormers, there would have to be so many windows occupying it that are then blocked by the parapet wall that it's not really feasible. So with the design that was proposed, we said those aren't dormers. They have more than a 3.5-foot knee wall if they are not dormers. Therefore, it's automatically a full story.
I'm not sure I agree with that zoning interpretation. Okay.
Can I ask a point of clarification? In our meeting packet, it describes that the 3-foot knee wall was intended to limit bulk above the first 2 floors, and I understood from the packet that having the aesthetics of the exterior of the building look more residential in nature was a desire as expressed by the neighbors. So from a non-architect point of view, help me understand if that's one of the intentions of that knee wall, and if that's what you think you have achieved by using that.
Well, the current knee wall, it is another thing that the ordinance, and you have to interpret a little bit, because the knee wall is horizontal on top, and the smallest size of the knee wall is 3.5 feet. Then the roof goes back, it is sloped back to the rear. So at the rear, the current knee wall is more than 4 feet high. So we decided that we will not touch the knee wall because we wanted to keep the building, the part of the building that we can keep, and the height of the sides of the building at the same level that they are now. We will only be replacing the top of the knee wall, which is a cementitious cap, and we will replace it with a similar one. So this was the architectural intent, and we kept it. That's why we pushed the new walls of the third level inwards about 1.5 feet, so that the normal view from the street going up, cutting through the parapet wall, it hides most of the future third level. And we minimized the slope of the roof and other architectural tricks so that the whole building looks not so bulkier, even less bulkier than it is now, because now we have a second floor that projects full facade to the street. We're cutting it back so that from the street view it will look much less intrusive.
No, visually from what was included in the packet, I would agree with that. It definitely appears less bulky, and I agree with that statement.
Thank you.
I have another question about the need for the third floor. So, if we're not increasing the intensity of use of the space, and you might have addressed this, and I was talking about something else, so I apologize if you've already spoken to this. But if we're not increasing the intensity of use, so we're not putting more people in the building, we're not adding services, we're not doing any of those things, why do we need to go from 2 offices to now 3 offices? Why do we need to add classrooms and those sorts of things that we didn't have before?
I will add a little bit to what the rabbi told at the start. Besides the ADA accessibility issues and all these things that are very important, by the way, they require space too, because currently bathrooms are, I don't say bad, but they are really not compliant with anything, even with the usual code. So for ADA, we do not speak. So this is one, it requires space. Then what they do currently is they are using one and the same space for different purposes. For instance, classes, festivities, meditation room, everything takes place in one and the same room. So in order to accommodate these needs, they move furniture every time. They don't have storage for furniture. So chairs stand somewhere in the corner while they're having classes, and when they have service, they move the chairs back. So this is a chaotic thing over there, and it is only the rabbi with his helpers, and it is really, really bad. And it, besides everything else, it brings not a good feeling to people coming there. Sometimes they come during these transitions, and it's a funny thing inside a serious institution. So that's why this is important. Besides that, they are not they have some services that are out of the synagogue, but they have new rabbis that are participating in these services. And these rabbis, they need to have an office. Currently, inside the building, there is only one office and one library. So they need the two other offices, and everything else that I told you about classrooms, it needs space. Besides the current, let's say, ritual space, it is packed with chairs. There is no room inside for anything. It needs a little bit of enlargement. It needs a decent lobby because people gather, people converse, they need their time before entering inside. So all these things, they pile up. It needs space. That's the need for the remodeling.
One more question, which is about the stairs up there, the front stairs, right? I know that you need two sets of stairs in and out, right? That set of stairs, are you able to meet headroom, code-required headroom,
Yes.
without the 7'2" wall? 7.2 foot wall.
Oh, you mean in the attic?
Yeah.
No.
So that stair that goes from the second floor to the attic, you need that. So how much of that 7.2 feet do you need to meet headroom for that stair?
I think that it climbs up at a point that is exactly by the wall, so I need. The minimum is 6'8".
Right.
You know that.
Right.
But it is 7'5" because 6'8" for me looks really tough when I pass it.
Is it 7.5 or was it? I thought it was 7.
It's 7'2" inside, if I have to be correct.
Right. I thought it was 7.2 feet. Is that right?
Correct. Inside, outside, measured to the intersection of the eave and the exterior wall, I believe it's 7. I believe it's 7, actually. I'm not sure. I don't have
Right, but we do all the measuring from the inside, right? The 3.5 knee wall is on the inside. It's not on the outside, right, Melissa?
No, I believe
Oh, it's the exterior.
the exterior.
Okay.
Yes,
So it's 7.2 on the inside and 7.5 on the outside.
I believe so.
Okay. Okay. And just because I'm curious, did the front originally look more like the back?
More like what?
More like the back? Before you went through many
that's-
revisions at
Well,
preservation?
yes and no. When we started the project, the front was at the facade surface that is currently there, and it was much more, let's say, imposing or much more grandioso, I would say. It was definitely not looking like a residence.
Okay.
So in the course of the project, we scaled down, we worked with the neighbors, we worked with the preservation committee to came up with what is currently in front of you.
Not because nobody's asking, but my 2 cents, I like the back much better than the front. I
The
think,
back
I think it's more interesting. I don't think we make churches to look like houses, and I don't think we make those sorts of religious institutions to look like houses. So I'm not sure why we're making this one look like a house, but that's just me and my 2 cents.
I have to confess that I share this opinion, but in the course of project, I respect the opinion of all the neighbors, and that's why I worked
Right.
hard to come up with this
Okay.
solution.
Thank you. I appreciate
Thank you.
that. All right. Does anybody else have any more questions? Okay. You guys are all done. All right, fabulous. Is there
Thank
anything
you.
else you'd like to say before I ask if there are neighbors?
Unless you have something you want to ask me, I mean,
Nope, I'm good.
office
Thank you.
space is important.
All right, so I have a list of lots of neighbors, and unfortunately, I don't know which project you want to speak on, so I can't call you by name. So how many people are there who are interested in speaking about this particular project? We have 2, 3. Okay, fabulous. So if you guys want to come up and state your name and address, we do have a lot of stuff to get to tonight, so if you could please limit your comments to about 3 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes. And the other people, if you agree with what he says, it's okay just to say, I agree. They mean the same thing for us. So, all right.
Thank you for your attention. My name is Dave Schoenfeld. I live at 2039 Orrington, so less than a block north of the proposed project. I've been involved with land use matters in this neighborhood for more than 20 years, both as a member of the Northwestern Neighbors Homeowners Association in that neighborhood, and also as a member of the City University Committee appointed by the mayor to serve on that committee, which was founded under a consent decree with Northwestern to address land use issues involving the university in that area in our neighborhood. And so as you can imagine, we are very, very sensitive in this neighborhood to 2 things in particular. One is the preservation of the residential character of the neighborhood. It is a historic district. It is a neighborhood, and that's not an easy thing to protect when you have a major institutional land user right in your backyard hungry for property. And we've worked very, very hard to protect the neighborhood from institutional intrusion with some success and some failure. But we have always worked to preserve these 2 interests. When we look at this project, we are very grateful to Rabbi Klein and his colleagues for the way that they've worked with us to try to reduce the institutional character of this project. But there is no getting around the fact, when you look at this and you look at the way that both the interior and the exterior of the property are being remodeled for an institutional use, that this is cementing in place the institutional character of this property in this residential neighborhood. And it is not the same as a church in the sense that the other entities that have properties for religious purposes on Orrington are using Victorian homes that are preserved in that character for their purposes. So they're not building churches in the neighborhood. This is a different character of institutional use. So as a consequence, as we've worked with Rabbi Klein and his colleagues to try to address those concerns, we've been very cognizant of the fact that this property is being institutionalized to a still greater degree than it already was, with some of the interior changes that are being made, as well as some of the exterior changes. And that has heightened our concern about what will be the use of this property while Chabad uses it, and in the event that they choose to move to another facility or another location, what will become of that property at that point, because it is being converted from a residential character to a much more institutional character. So in order to assuage the concerns that we've got with this, we did work with Rabbi Klein on a set of proposed conditions. We went to the 1978 Special Use Ordinance, looked at that, thought about our conversations with Rabbi Klein and the others about their intended use, and try to work out something that would be acceptable to the neighbors, would be acceptable to Chabad House. And so we made a proposal. We adjusted it at Rabbi Klein's request with respect to whether or not a rabbi and his family or her family could live in the property. We took that out and as a condition. But there are a couple of things that are different between the 1978 ordinance and our proposal, and I think Rabbi Klein mentioned one of those, and that is the list of additional uses that will not be permitted there. such as counseling matters and bed and breakfast and so forth. And I think we're all on the same page that those are not intended uses. But as we look down the road, we want to ensure that this property cannot be used for those purposes without review by the City Council of any changes to the special use. So these things
You're lucky in that regard because they can't be used for other special uses without permission to use them that way. So a granting of or use as a religious institution doesn't permit a use as a bed and breakfast. So in 40 years, should someone want to use that house for a bed and breakfast, they would need to make application for that special use for their purposes.
And just to be further clear, even if the current owners choose to leave and make it a bed and breakfast, even though it's the same ownership, the use changes, and so they've got to come back to us anyhow.
Okay.
Got to come back to us and then City Council.
I'm glad to hear that.
You're covered.
Okay. And the last of the second change is we wanted to emphasize that just that point that if they do leave or cease to use it in its current function, that the special uses that are permitted and the conditions on those special uses the special use will be limited to Chabad's use of the property and not some other organization. And that's the other request we've made. That was a part of the 1978 ordinance, and we have a clause in there that sort of beefs that up a little bit and that would make us feel more comfortable. So those are the things that we have requested. But I want to emphasize, above all, we're very glad we've been able to work this out, but these conditions are essential to our comfort with this. We think we've got a good relationship here, but we can support this request as neighbors despite the concerns we've got, because and only if these conditions are accepted. Otherwise, our concerns are not being met. So I want to ask that these be taken seriously, even though they're agreed. And I do appreciate your attention, and I especially want to say again that we appreciate Rabbi Klein's flexibility and willingness to work with us, both on the design and on these uses. And I think that we've reached, if you'll approve the conditions we've requested, we've reached a place where the neighbors are comfortable with this, and we look forward to a long relationship with the Chabad House. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else who'd like to speak to this? Again, it's okay to say I agree. Nobody else? All right. Rabbi Klein, are there any closing words you'd like to say? Do you want to comment on anything the neighbor said? Are you feeling comfortable?
Well,
That's fantastic.
You can't say that to a rabbi because what rabbi won't take the microphone? And you said I had another thing here. Wow.
My bad. Lesson learned.
Anyway, no, I agree. I mean, as I said earlier, that the conditions that our neighbors really wanted, those are the conditions that we were coming here for. Our concern is to be able to do this project. I personally, it's just for mine, and I'm not an architect, but when we saw some of those designs that did have the dormers on the side, we felt that really made the building look more bulkier. I don't think the neighbors would have been happy with that. I think they're very happy with where we're at, which is, I think, one of the most important things. And it hides the third floor, as Kirill mentioned, which doesn't intrude out onto the community. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will close the record. Comments from the board.
As a general matter, I'll start with I support this project and the relief requested tonight because I think it meets the criteria for the relief requested. With respect to the special use, as I said, I think it's lovely that that the Chabad House and the neighbors have worked together on the conditions. I'm actually not sure if we can set a special use condition that runs with the occupant rather than the property. I've asked that in the past, and that may need a legal opinion. You don't have to respond right away.
Give me a quick second.
Okay. With respect to the condition that precludes uses that are not covered by the use requested, if it keeps the neighbors happy, then I'm all in favor of including it in a recommendation to council, although it's really an extraneous provision because we don't need to, for the reasons I pointed out to Mr. Schoenfeld. With respect to the variations requested, I do think there's a hardship that runs with this property. I think that it is a residential property in a residential R1 neighborhood that does have a long-standing now permitted, and that institution is the user of that property, and the relief being requested to a large extent just extends up, which, as the chair commented earlier on the record, is something we routinely grant with respect to variations. But with respect also to the knee wall, I believe that the standards will be met because, frankly, it's the institutional nature of the use combined with the fact that it's that it's a residential neighborhood, but also that the applicant is working so hard to preserve the residential character of the property that requires that solution as opposed to, for example, the bulkier dormer solution or something that may closer comply or perhaps require less consideration from the board in terms of a variation. So, in my view, when we run through the standards for a variation, I believe in my view, they'll all be met, and I think it's an important project for this institution to repurpose the space they have and make it more usable for them.
Thank you.
Actually, as I look at the project, I think it's a great project for the community. I think that the changes will be in keeping with the surrounding architectural, especially since they've kept it very residential in the front. But I do have a question. I'm not sure what it means that if they move, would this property ever go back to residential? Is that what we hope that it would be? I mean, these changes that are being made to for this institutional use, and I just wonder if I don't see this neighborhood going backwards in time to residential. It is a university; they are encroaching on more and more of the community, and I just wondered about that.
I think it's a good point, but for 40 plus years, it's been an institutional use, and the applicant has testified that their intent is to spend a lot of money to make it so they can stay there for a long time to come. I think they've gone to great lengths to preserve the residential feel of the property, and by doing that, at a minimum, I think this institution is doing what it can to preserve the possibility of residential use while still working with the space they have and purposing it for their own uses. I think it's a reasonable concern to think about.
I understand that, and I think that this is a reasonable proposal, and I agree with it.
I think on balance, it's a good proposal that sort of meets the needs, as I understand, of the organization for them to continue to operate out of a space that's become, outdated and not functional, as I understand. At the same time, it sounds like the applicant has gone to significant lengths, I would say, in meeting the concerns of the Preservation Committee and doing an extensive process of meeting with the neighbors and addressing neighborhood concerns. To my untrained architectural eye, I find I find it pleasing to look at the proposed changes that are intended. I do think it will be more in keeping with the residential feel of that neighborhood, and I support the project.
Thank you. So this is a tough one for me because I I struggle with the hardship being peculiar to the property because the property is still residential. It is not institutional. The use may be institutional, but the property is still residential. And I would feel better having seen the original sketches of what this looked like with the dormers on the sides that didn't require a variance for that purpose. Again, so I have no problems with all the other variances, though truth be told, just to clarify the record, they are expanding the footprint because that area that's underneath a roof in the back, that is technically not in the footprint of the building, right? They now have to add new foundation. So technically, they are increasing the footprint. However, again, in the past, and what we have done as a board is if there is the mass there, we have considered that to be part of the building. So when there is a covered roof, we generally allow people to enclose it. And when you enclose it, you have to put in a foundation. So that's how we get to that. So I really have no issue with any of those sorts of, all the other requests. And I do have to say, this is markedly different from the last time you were here, right? That was just an experience. I think that was my first year on the board, and those might have been my first meetings, and it was intense. So I appreciate, again, what you've done to work with the neighborhood and to get everybody to be in an agreeable situation. So sort of the best reason I can come up with for allowing there to be this higher knee wall is really about the stairs. And I understand from a planning perspective and the way that the plan is of this third floor and quite frankly the second floor, you can't move the stairs to a location where you can get that headroom, that code-required headroom, without having that taller wall. And I have been up against this problem myself, and I know it is brutal, and you go through 18 revisions to try and figure it out. And at some point, you just can't do it. And so I think that happens to be your greatest hardship is that you can't meet code. And meeting code is a key component for me of a hardship, right? If you can't meet code, then that's not a good thing. So, with that, let's go to, sorry.
Can I clarify? So then, you wound up in a different place than I thought you were starting.
It's true.
Okay, so to
Because
clarify,
I wound up in a different place than where I started.
So to clarify, then, you
Yeah.
think the hardship requirement is met because of the reasons you stated?
Because of the code requirements
Yes.
for egress. Yes. And being able to meet egress. So, yes. The question I have is, why are we running through a special use again? They're not changing their use.
Because the bulk of the building is increasing, staff's view is that is an increased impact.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So let's.
Sorry, hold on.
Yep.
Can we
Oh,
touch
right.
back with City Council on the?
Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, we can revisit. With respect to the inquiry, whether a special use runs with the land, the County of Cook VMO not really affords the opportunity to primarily run with the land, but there are certain circumstances such as durational requirements. So you can potentially have a durational limitation, but special uses do run with the land.
So would it be appropriate then to condition the granting of a special use based on the applicant in some sort of quasi-durational framing, like as long as the applicant is the owner?
It would have to be explicitly related to time, to the duration of it, of the operator operating on said land.
But just to be clear, if it runs with the land, right, so the special use is for religious use. So the only other user of this property is a religious institution.
That's correct. So if a subsequent religious
Yeah.
user,
Right. But I don't see how that changes anything for the neighbors, right? They agreed to a religious institution.
Well,
What is it?
except the neighbors may want to pick and choose the institution they agree to be neighbors with, is what it does. I don't, in my view, that condition is not.
That's what I'm saying.
Appropriate.
That's what I'm saying is it doesn't matter because if they've agreed to have agreed to these conditions for a religious institution next to them, what does it matter what the religious institution is?
and just another point of clarification, there can't be a disparate treatment of religious institutions.
Right. Some are
They all
more
need to
equal
be
than
treated.
others.
No, they all need to be treated
Right.
the same.
Also, just to note, if a different religious institution wanted to be located at the property, if they had any operational differences, they would be required to obtain at least a substitution of special use, if
Okay.
not a new special use.
And what's the process for? Sorry, what's the process for a substitution of special use?
It is an administrative process, but all property owners within 500 feet of the property are notified and are able to provide comments.
Okay. And is that something that happens administratively? If is there a means for appealing that administrative decision? Is it similar to everything else?
Yes, it could be appealed by any
Okay.
property owner notified.
By any property owner within that 500 feet?
Correct.
Okay. So I think we're covered on every single front, right? Right? Without making the modifications. Okay. All right. So I'm going to thank you, Mario. Appreciate that. Let's go through the standards for special uses. There are 9 of them. And number 1, it's one of the special uses specifically listed in the zoning ordinance. It's a religious institution, which is certainly allowed, so that standard has been met. Number 2, it's in keeping with the purposes and policies of the adopted comprehensive general plan and the zoning ordinance as amended from time to time. One of the purposes is to retain and enhance the diversity of uses within a certain location, and to keep and so that standard has certainly been met. Number 3, it will not cause a negative cumulative effect when its effect is considered in conjunction with the cumulative effect of various special uses of all types on the immediate neighborhood and the effect of the proposed type of special use upon the city as a whole. According to testimony, there is actually no increase in intensity of use. There will not be more people in the space, and so we're certainly not making the situation. We're not changing the way that this particular use impacts the neighborhood. So I believe that standard has been met. Number 4, it does not interfere with or diminish the value of the property in the neighborhood. The special use is already there. It's already baked in, if you will, to the value of the property in the neighborhood. And in fact, some of the changes that are being made to it will certainly increase the value of properties in the neighborhood, given an updated and more residential exterior to the property. So I believe that standard has been met. Number 5, it can be adequately served by public facilities and services. Again, there's no change in use here, so I believe that standard has been met. And number 6, it does not cause undue traffic congestion. This goes back to the intensity of use, and again, they're not suggesting that they have indicated that there will be no more people using the space than was ever using the space before. So we certainly do not expect more traffic to the location. So that standard has been met. Number 7, it preserves significant historical and architectural resources. Although the building isn't significant historically or architecturally, it is in a neighborhood full of historical and architectural resources. And by making some modifications to that, we will certainly be helping to enhance that historical neighborhood. So I believe that standard has been met. Number 8, it preserves significant natural and environmental features, which does not apply. And number 9, it complies with all other applicable regulations of the district in which it is located and other applicable ordinances, except to the extent such regulations have been modified through the plan development process or the grant of a variation. And that will be met if they're required to have a license. So with that, can I have a motion for recommendation to City Council?
I'll make a motion for a recommendation to City Council with respect to the special use permit requested for 2014 Orrington Avenue in KCBA 17ZMJV-0018, that we recommend that the special use be granted, subject to the list of conditions. I don't know that we marked it as an exhibit, but I have a copy and I've slightly marked it up. So why don't I mark that as
Okay.
Exhibit
A.
which was a letter submitted to the zoning board before the meeting tonight, signed by 5 of the neighbors who are in agreement with the project. There were 9 conditions listed, and they built off of the existing conditions for the existing special use. So I would recommend that we grant that the city council grant the special use requested, subject to the condition that they adopt the list of conditions that the neighbors and the applicant came to together, with the following recommended amendments. And I have marked as Exhibit A what I recommend the amendments be. In item number 3, which reads, use of the premises will exclude other uses described in Evanston zoning ordinance, etc., I recommend that it say special uses described in Evanston zoning ordinance. And I recommend that we strike condition number 8, which is the condition that the special use apply only to the applicant, because I believe that condition is not permissible. And I'll pass that for consideration, I guess, before we get a second or a vote. My markup.
Yeah, I agree with your markups. The other two?
Just to clarify, number 3, is that needed based on the discussion that we've had before us this evening?
It's not needed, but it's extraneous in my view, but it makes the neighbors happy. So.
Okay, very good.
And is number 9 one of our uses as well? The covenant be recorded and submitted?
Yeah, that's staying in.
That existed in the existing
In the
use.
original, okay.
That's also essentially required anyway. We required all special uses be recorded.
Oh, okay.
It's a standard provision within all the special use ordinances.
Okay.
Maybe just, Madam Chair, a clarification or something to consider regarding the use condition there. The definition of religious institution does include an accessory use, such as a school, daycare center, or dwelling. So without any limitation, a daycare center, school, or dwelling would be allowed as part of a religious institution.
As an accessory use to a religious institution.
Correct.
So the agreed prohibition on, as amended, other special uses would apply to special use as a daycare center that's not as an accessory use to a religious institution, in my view. In other words, a religious institution would still be permitted to use, even with this condition, would be permitted to the extent it otherwise could, under the ordinance, use it as an accessory use for daycare.
Or a school.
So yeah, if you wanted to limit it further, it would require a condition, because otherwise a religious institution would allow for daycare center. So if the intent is to not allow an accessory daycare center, then that would be something that would need to be a condition.
I don't think that's the intent. I think the intent is that the premises will not be, we're not granting a special use for the premises to be used as a daycare center, quad daycare center. However, if a religious institution is allowed to use a religious institution special use for that accessory purpose, then the condition wouldn't prohibit that.
If you want to prohibit it, you want to word it so that it would prohibit it. So
I
that's the
think
consideration.
we're talking in the same direction. I don't think we do want to prohibit it.
I understand the school to be a part of their activities, like they teach. Right.
How about this, though, to clarify that? So for number 3, inserting the words, use of the premises outside of the uses permitted by the special use granted.
I can accept that.
Okay, I agree as well.
Lisa?
Yeah, that's acceptable. Are there any of the other typical language that we include with special uses that would apply here?
Like hours and parking and litter collection?
Yeah, I mean, is any of that pertinent?
No. I don't think so. I don't think so.
Then I provide a second to Scott's motion.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And with a vote of 4-0, you go to City Council with a recommendation for your special use, to continue your special use. Okay, now we're moving on to the standards for major variations. Hey, don't go yet. I got a whole nother half hour on this. I know, it sounds exciting, but this is good stuff. Come on now. My fans on TV love this. All right. There are them. They're out there. All right. So you think I'm joking. They show up at public meetings. Okay. So there are 7 standards for major variations. And number 1 is the requested variation will not have a substantial adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, or property values of adjoining properties. I do believe that standard has been met. The additions are, again, relatively within the existing bulk of the building, which is something we allow all the time. I also want to commend the applicant for doing shadow studies, which again show that there is a negligible effect on any neighbor from a light and an air use. So I do believe that standard has been met. Number 2, the requested variation is in keeping with the intent of the zoning ordinance. The intent of the zoning ordinance is to allow you to make modifications to your property as are needed from time to time to update it in keeping with needs of with the needs of the owners. So I do believe that standard has been met. Number 3, the alleged hardship or practical difficulty is peculiar to the property. I do believe that given the size of the size of the footprint and the necessary planning and layout of the first and second floors, that there are specific locations necessary for 2 code-required stairs. And those code-required stairs require headroom. And in order to get the adequate amount of headroom, it is necessary to increase the height of those knee walls. So I do believe that the alleged hardship is peculiar to this particular property. So I think that standard has been met. Number 4.
All right, I'll just add for the record to the reasons. I believe that standard is met additionally because of the residential character of the property and neighborhood that has been for a long time used institutionally rather than residentially. I believe that standard is met as well.
Thank you. Number 5, the purpose of the variation is not based, number 4, the property owner would suffer a particular hardship or practical difficulty as distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the strict letter of the regulations were to be carried out. Again, this gets back to that idea of the egress and stairs and headroom and all of that being required. And that is a hardship when you cannot meet egress because it means that you can't do anything. So I do believe that standard has been met. Number 5.
I would add to that one, that we're talking about a use 40 years later of a building that was purposed 40 years ago. And I think it would be a hardship rather than a mere inconvenience to force them to continue to use that space now in the 2010s and almost 2020s as it was purposed 40 years ago.
I agree.
Thank you. Number 5, the purpose of the variation is not based exclusively upon a desire to extract additional income from the property or there is a public benefit. I don't believe that their reason for improving the property is to extract income, but I think the primary thing here is that there is a public benefit, and that benefit is to take an outdated elevation that it clearly does not fit within the neighborhood and try to make something that fits a little bit more into the neighborhood. So I do believe that standard has been met. Number 6, the alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person having an interest in the property. Again, the building is old. My guess is 1920s or older. And so it has been there for a long time, longer than the current owner. So I believe that standard has been met. And number 7, the requested variation requires the least deviation from the applicable regulation among the feasible options identified before the Zoning Board of Appeals. And again, this gets back to that whole idea of headroom and code required headroom, and the amount of that knee wall is being increased is really limited to an amount of headroom necessary for those stairs. So I do believe that standard has been met.
I would just add, with respect to the seventh standard, that while less intrusive solutions may have been possible, there are trade-offs involved with them that include a visual harm to the neighborhood from the additional bulk that they would cause, and I think the trade-off is reasonable under the circumstances.
I agree.
I would only argue we didn't see what those looked like, so we don't really know what they were.
We do have testimony under oath, though.
We do. All right, so 7 major standards for a major variation. We now, is there a motion?
So with respect to the variations requested, is there a reason that because this is packaged with special use that we're recommending on this also? Okay. So I move that with respect, in the same case, that we recommend that City Council grant the variations requested, subject to the condition that the property be developed in accordance with the plans and testimony submitted tonight.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And with a vote of 4-0, you go to City Council with a recommendation for approval of your your major variations as well. Good luck with your project. You can now leave. All right. Board, does anybody need to take a break before we start the next case? Everybody good? Everybody good? Oh. All right. And with that, we're going to welcome Carol back. All right. So now Melissa's going to read 2626 Reese into the record.
William James, contractor, applies for major zoning relief to construct a 2-story single-family residence in the R1 single-family residential district. The applicant requests 37.9% building lot coverage where a maximum 30% is allowed, zoning code section 6827, a 4-foot street side yard setback, Hartzell Street, where 15 feet is required for the principal structure, zoning code section 6828A2, a 3-foot street side yard setback where 15 feet is required for the accessory structure, detached garage, zoning code section 6828C2, an accessory structure in a street side yard closer to the street than the principal structure, zoning code section 6462F, and a 1-foot street side yard setback where 13.5 feet is required for the porch, yard obstruction, zoning code section 6419B1. The Zoning Board of Appeals is the determining body for this case. Documents included as part of the record include variation application submitted August 29th, 2017, zoning analysis, plat of survey, site plans revised November 28th, 2017, elevations, landscape plan, letters of opposition, image of property, aerial view of property, zoning map of property, DAPR meeting minutes of September 20th, 2017, as well as one letter that I'm about to hand out. And
Mark that as Exhibit A. B? No, A. New case. Get to start over.
it's 2 pages.
Okay, it's 2 pages,
Can you think of it?
but it's not in our packet from before.
No,
Okay.
it is new. And, sorry. Yes, 2 pages long. And I believe the applicant has materials to pass out as well.
Okay. Oh, you got a lot. All right. So before you get started, would you mind coming up? We get all those labeled, passed out, and then we can be... When you say 2 pages, Melissa, you mean front and back, right? Yes. It's 1 page front and back.
Yes, the first one was not, which is what confused me.
Okay. I gotcha. All right. So the email from Richard Horsting is what we're labeling Exhibit A. Okay. And now we're going to start labeling applicants Exhibit 1, which is a set of plans on 11 by 17. And are these different than what we have in our... They are different. Okay.
No, I mean, the plans are the same plans that ones that have...
Bigger
They got
plans.
copies because the resolution on the screen might not be there.
Okay. Fabulous, thank you. So they are the same plans that are in our packet. So there is applicant's exhibit 1, which is the plans, and applicant's exhibit 2. Tell me what 2 is. Tell me what this is.
It is material that I distributed at a neighbor meeting prior to filing for the variance application.
Okay, so applicant's exhibit 2 is your original proposal with the neighbors.
It is a series of alternatives.
A series of alternatives. Right. Okay, great. I love alternatives. All right. Please tell us your name and address, and then tell us about your project.
William James, 345 Sherman Avenue, Evanston.
Great.
And so how do I... Oh, there it is. Is this mine?
No.
Nope. Okay. Okay. So I do have a rather extensive presentation, somewhat technical. I've really endeavored to make the strongest case possible for the merits of these variances. I just want to say that, I appreciate the efforts of staff, and nothing in this presentation would call into question the competency of staff, and they've been very professional and conscientious all the way through. But I am going to talk about the ordinance and some interpretations. So with that, this is the organization of my presentation. I think all of these components are important and essential. And so the first component would be my background and qualifications. There are 2 parts to this. First is the home builder part. So I have built 22 houses in Evanston. And you see a selection of them here. I started out in South Evanston, and I guess it's the 9th Ward, Anne Rainey's ward, and got a chance to speak with her here. I asked her to stick around and say a few words on my behalf, but she had to leave. If she had stayed, I'm sure she would have given me credit for contributions to the neighborhood. As time went on and opportunities have presented themselves, I've moved outside to other parts of Evanston. I would like you to note, I think the attention that I paid to the exterior design of the houses, try to put in a lot of detail, a lot of attractive features, decorative features, accent lighting at night, and so forth. And so these would be features that I would incorporate onto this house. In addition to a home builder, I'm also a planning and zoning expert. So I'm a partner in the firm Camiros Limited. Not sure if you've heard of it or not, but we have done dozens of zoning ordinances. When I say done them, we've written zoning ordinances for many, many communities. We have 2 categories: national zoning ordinances for bigger cities, and then local zoning ordinances for communities in the metro area. And I have authored many of Camiros' zoning ordinances over the years. And I bring this up because I guess I would like to be recognized as an expert on matters of zoning regulation and interpretation. I think it's important to talk about what I call the basis for the variance request, why I'm here, why I decided to do this. So obviously I was approached by the former owner of the property who wanted to get out and offered to sell to me. And in considering this, I performed due diligence, and I approached the city to ask very plainly, this is a non-conforming lot. I know there's neighbor opposition to this. Whether it's written or unwritten, is the city's policy that lots like this should not be built on, that they should either remain open space or be combined with the adjacent property, whatever. And I was told that, in fact, it's the city's policy that lots like this should be built on. The staff was also very clear in saying that it's up to you to make the case for the variances,
Just to be clear, who did you have that conversation with?
Well, with Melissa, and I'm not sure if it was Scott or Scott's predecessor.
Go ahead.
Agree. We spoke quite a bit.
Okay.
So I was told very clearly that if you meet the standards for variance, the ZBA would grant the variances. Okay? And that the request for variance would be decided on their technical merit. Yes, the neighbors would be heard, and to the extent that the neighbors speak to the technical merits of the application, then that material would be considered. But the mere opposition by neighbors would not be the deciding factor in denying requests for variance. So those were two key considerations in my decision to move forward. The third is that I looked at the prior application, which application for variances that was put on a hearing docket, but that the owner withdrew because they decided to get out. And that application was a much larger house and required much greater degrees of variance than I thought I could achieve. And so I thought, well, if this proposal received a favorable recommendation from the city's technical review body, DAPR, I can do better, and I should be able to get a positive recommendation as well. And, in fact, I did get a favorable recommendation from DAPR, 7-1 vote in favor of the project and the individual variances. It came with a condition to achieve an additional 2.5% reduction in building coverage, which I...
If you don't mind my interrupting just for a minute, I think the only clarification I want to make is that DAPR technically does not follow standards for variations. So although they may give you a positive recommendation, they're not basing that necessarily on those standards for variations. Right.
They did discuss the variations, and they did recommend in favor. Whether or not the recommendation is based on the standards, I can see that they may not have been. Okay. So I achieved the additional building coverage reduction. It was difficult, but I did it. I'm prepared to live with it. And last but not least, I think the hardship for this property is very clear. The city of Evanston approved the subdivision that created the lot and created the zoning regulations that made development on the lot impossible without variations. So I think the city very much has a hand in the creation of this hardship, and that, frankly, should be some consideration in terms of an obligation to grant the variances. That is my opinion, okay? So I want to present the plans for the house and to provide some background on how I approached the design of the house. So first and foremost was compatibility with the neighborhood, to look at other homes in the neighborhood, look at how they're positioned on the lot, look at the yards, look at the style of architecture, and to try to make this a seamless addition to the neighborhood. And so in terms of scale massing and all of that, a key factor in the design approach was to minimize the perception of bulk and mass. This isn't a non-conforming lot. It's a 25-foot wide lot. And I want to do everything I could to make the mass that goes with the house recede as much as possible. Okay? And ways that I have sought to do this would be what I call facade articulation, which was to break up the mass of the house into different parts. So the addition of a bay window here in the front helps break up that front elevation. The side elevation is broken up into three building masses. The middle part is recessed. The other two ends stick out. And so the breaking up of this mass will help reduce the scale and perception of bulk for the house. The roof line is also broken up into different components, which I think will also help reduce the mass. You can see that there are some big trees, fortunately, in the parkway, which I think provides scale and will be much taller than this house and also help to provide scale for the house. I wanted to make the yards comparable to other houses in the surrounding area, and I wanted the style of the house to be traditional, which is what most of the houses in that area are. I didn't want to propose a very modern house, for example, that would be in stark contrast to the other houses in the area. Last, but certainly not least, I really had to insist that the house design must meet the needs of a modern family. I don't want to design a house that replicates or is based on houses from 75 years ago. Okay, so I wanted, for example, 3 bedrooms and 2 baths all on the second level that I think is a basic program standard for new homes today. Also, I really wanted to minimize the degree of variance requested, both the number of variances and the degree of variance that I was asking for. I think I've done that, and obviously to meet the variance standards. What you see here are some massing studies that I did prior to applying for variance, and these were used in the meeting that I had with the neighbors. So this is the site plan and first floor plan, and you can see that the house is positioned toward the east of the lot. This is Reese, this is Hartzell. Staff determined that the average, that the required front yard based on the average of front yards on this on the street would be 19 feet 6 inches, so I brought the house right up to that. The bay window is an allowable projection into that yard. You can see the different spaces, the massing of these 3 different components of the floor plan. It has, I think, the basic program that would be needed for a house today, an entry area, living room, closet area, powder room, staircase, dining room, kitchen. None of these are big rooms. I think they're all serviceable and would be workable.
Before you move on, would you mind giving us dimensions of the living room, the dining room, and the kitchen, please? Interior room dimensions?
So really, what I've focused on is the exterior dimensions of the house, okay? So the house is 16 feet wide, so the living room, if you take off half a foot for the exterior wall on each side,
right,
then the living room is going to be 15 feet by, I haven't actually dimensioned it here, but it looks like something like 14 feet. Okay? This dining room area here is 13 feet outside wall to outside wall, which means it's 12 feet.
Right.
So this is probably 12 feet by 13 feet. And the kitchen, again, the exterior wall there would be 16 feet outside to outside, so 15 feet by, it looks to be 13 feet.
And the stairs, are those a standard 3-foot wide stair?
It is, I made them, yes, it's 7 feet 3 inches. It's, I really like to have a little wider stair than that.
So it's a 42-inch stair?
42-inch stair.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then that powder room is a little bigger than normal just to get the 2 closets and a walkway in, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. The 2-car garage is actually smaller than a standard 2-car garage, 20 by 20. This is 19 by 20. So what I wanted to do here, again, is to minimize the number of variances that I've asked for. So there was no way that I would avoid a street side yard variance of 15 feet. But by positioning the house more toward the street side yard and away from the interior side yard, I was able to provide a 5-foot yard and not need a variance on the interior side yard. Likewise, with the 2-car garage, there was no way I was going to avoid a street side yard variance for the garage, but by making the garage only 19 feet wide and having an equal yard on each side, I meet the interior side yard for an accessory structure of 3 feet, and I need a variance for the 3-foot street side yard for the garage. So in that way, I've minimized the variances that I've needed here. So the building coverage is 37.9%. I want to point out that the threshold for a minor variation in the situation is 40.5%, so I'm well within that minor
Sorry,
threshold.
I just want to make sure I'm reading this right. Is that the entryway is 1 foot from the sidewalk?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So what I'm asking for here is merely a stoop in front of the front door, okay? 8 inches above the ground, a concrete stoop, 3 feet wide. I've dimensioned that at 9'6". You know, rather than having to extend the sidewalk right up to the door, I just want a little stoop, okay? And this is very common within the neighborhood, and I'll show you examples of these things. So,
Stoop is common, or it's common to have it be a foot from the sidewalk?
Well, what's common is obstructions like this in the required yard. So I'll show you examples of stairs that are in the required yard, that are multiple stairs in the required yard, and as I said, I'm asking just for an 8-inch stoop in front of the front door. And I'm not sure if I was actually surprised that that there was a variance for a porch 1 foot from the property line. I thought I had the need for a obstruction variance for the canopy, which I'll show you, but we can certainly come back to this. I think the elevations will help show what I'm talking about. The second floor plan works. It has 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. None of these are big rooms. I think they're serviceable, and like I said, I think I can live with this. The basement I consider to be bonus space. It doesn't add to the bulk of the building. It's 90% underground. It would provide a space for kids' playroom, recreation room, a guest bedroom, a laundry room, a place for the furnace and hot water heater, that kind of thing, and a bathroom downstairs. This is the north elevation, which would be where the main entrance would be. And so we can see this is the bay window facing Reese Avenue. This is that one mass of the building, the middle mass, which is recessed, and then the end where the kitchen is at that comes back out to 16 feet wide. Another aspect of the design is to use some mix of materials, again, to break up the space visually, add some different color, make it more decorative. This is the front canopy. It only projects 18 inches. I didn't consider this to be a porch, that something projecting from the wall of the building this far would be a porch. But that's what it is. I have columns here as decorative features only. I can certainly eliminate them if that would make it not a porch. All the windows will be divided light windows. I will have moldings and trim around all the windows, make it more decorative and attractive. The overhangs will conform to the ordinance.
Just to be clear, it's 3 steps up into the house, right?
So there would be a step here.
Yep.
I think this is actually misleading. I think there are only 2 steps into the house.
So you think there's 1 step onto the landing and then 1 step into the house? Okay.
Yes.
And
Let me go back to the. You see there is this sidewalk here. This is really mostly on public property, mostly on the right of way, and then the raised portion of the concrete would be 1 foot away from the property line, and I have no second step there. So this elevation here actually is incorrect, that this would all be lowered and there would only be 1 step up to the stoop of the house.
And what is that landing outside that front door? What's that thing you're calling a stoop? How deep is that?
It's 3 feet. Okay, because the house is set back 4 feet from the
Thanks.
property line. The stoop is 1 foot behind the property line, and it's 3 feet. 3 feet by 9.96. The south elevation would be the interior elevation, and the same treatment would be accorded to this elevation in terms of the mix of materials, the quality of materials. These are fancy cut cedar shingles that would be painted. This would be pre-painted hardy board siding. The trim around the windows would all be AZEK or equal kinds of trim. for really zero maintenance over the life of the house. Architectural shingles on the roof. This portion of the facade would be set back an additional 2 feet. This is the 13-foot wide section that we saw on the plan. The rest of the house is 16 feet wide, so this essentially becomes an overhang here. Okay? And then the west and east elevations. The west elevation would face the rear yard. It's a nice elevation, really comparable to a lot of front elevations. You see the entry canopy here, 1 foot 6 inches. As I said, the decorative column could be eliminated. I could put just a decorative bracket here instead. And then this, again, is incorrect. There's just one step. There will just be one step up to the stoop. The east elevation would face Reese Avenue. The bay window here adds a nice decorative element, breaks up the mass. The same materials are used here. The entry canopy facing Hartzell Street. I always do a nice job of landscaping my houses. In addition to being a home builder and a planner zoner, I'm a registered landscape architect. I like to do this part of the house, and I would commit to doing landscaping on this house according to this plan. I would landscape the full perimeter of the house. The existence of large street trees, provides, like I said, a nice scale. I don't need to provide large trees on the lot, rather more ornamental trees and shrubs, ground covers, flower beds, that kind of thing, and all of that is provided for on the plan, and you can see ground cover beds, flower beds, and other things that would really make this an attractive landscape, for the neighborhood, and people would enjoy walking by this, and especially with accent night lighting, it would be very nice. So now, that was the plan. That's what I'm proposing, and now I would like to talk about the city zoning policy and neighborhood characteristics. I think the two things are tied up together. When you look at the zoning regulations that are applied to this area versus what conditions actually exist, I think the two things need to be talked about hand in hand. So, like I said, we do a lot of zoning ordinances for all kinds of communities. One of the things we do when we start is to look at existing conditions on the ground, look at lot sizes, look at yards, look at all these things, compare them to the regulations of the applicable zoning district. And I did that here and found that the zoning regulations for this area bear very little relationship to the existing form and character of this portion of Evanston. The city has two single-family districts. R1 is for larger lots, 7,200 square feet and 50 feet of lot width. And the other single-family district is the R2, intended for lots at least 5,000 square feet in size and lot widths of 35 feet. So the yards are basically the same for both districts. And by analysis, I found that the form and character of the surrounding area does not really match the R1 district regulation. So when we look at lot size, for example, the blue color identifies lots that are conforming with respect to required lot area. That would be 7,200 square feet or more. And the pink color designates all the lots that are non-conforming with respect to lot area. So what we see is that overwhelmingly, this area does not conform to the R1 regulations with respect to lot area.
Excuse me, can you locate the subject property on that map?
Yes. Right here.
Thank you. I didn't see that outline.
So I wanted to take an area, and this gray line here is the study area that I looked at. I wanted to go north of the central street frontage and to take in an area that appeared to have similar characteristics to each other within the neighborhood. So, clearly this is not actually an R1 area in terms of lot area.
Can I ask a question while we're here? It's probably better if I wait, but I'm going to forget if we wait.
Okay.
So in this particular instance, right, you're showing that two of the adjacent properties, right, that go west across the alley, and then the one property that goes east across Reese are existing or are non-conforming lot sizes, right?
With respect to lot area.
With respect to lot area.
Yes.
Yet both of those houses, those existing houses, managed to appear to meet that 15-foot side yard setback for a street side yard setback. How do you square that with a smaller, a non-conforming lot that can meet the requirements and a non-conforming lot that can't meet the requirements?
So, with respect to meeting the street side yard requirement, lot width is more important than lot area. So you may have a wider lot that is still not 7,200 square feet in size that allows the width to meet that.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to talk about non-conforming street side yards in just a minute.
So just to be clear then, the point of this diagram is really about lot coverage and what the allowable building size is
Not lot
versus
coverage.
setbacks?
It's really pointing out the inconsistency between the R1 standard for lot area and the lot areas that exist here.
Okay.
And really to ask the question, why was this area zoned R1? If the preponderance of lots don't meet the area requirement for R1, and I will go into other characteristics as well, why is it zoned R1? Because if it were zoned R2, I wouldn't need to have a variance for building coverage, okay? Because building coverage in R2 is 40%.
Okay, so you're using this as an argument for why the variances should be allowed?
Yes.
Specifically because of its lot size?
Yes, and basically, so this lot is 25 feet wide, 3,325 square feet, and the city chose to classify this, along with other lots in the area, as R1 as opposed to R2. Okay, I did not do a nonconformity due to lot area for R2. Okay, because I think this really satisfies the argument that R1 is not appropriate for this area with respect to lot area. Okay.
Okay.
So you brought up the question of non-conforming corner side yards. So based on the city's GIS and through visual reconnaissance of the corner lots in this area, I have determined that over half of the corner lots do not meet the street side yard requirement of the R1. Okay, so there is a wide degree of nonconformity with respect to corner side yards in this area.
Did you happen to catalog their degree of nonconformity?
I didn't.
Okay. Okay, so we don't know if they're off by a foot or if they're off by 14 feet.
Well, what I will say is that because I was working with your GIS information, basically using proportional scaling, where it was close, I classified it as conforming. Okay, so if it's really marginal, some of the conforming lots actually could be non-conforming, but I think none of the non-conforming lots designated here are conforming. Okay, you can just tell by the size of the various lots here. So this is a 25-foot wide lot. Okay, this is a 25-foot wide lot. This is less than 30. These look like they're very close to between 25 and 30 feet wide. So there are a number of lots here that are substantially under even the 35-foot lot width, let alone the 50-foot lot width, which is the R1 standard. So the R1 standard, there are probably very few lots here that conform to the 50-foot lot width standard of R1.
just to clarify, the required lot width in the R1 district is 35 feet.
Really? Sorry. I thought I had recorded that as 50 feet.
So how would that change the number of conforming and non-conforming on this slide?
On this slide, it wouldn't change it at all.
Okay.
We're talking about yards, not lot width here. Okay.
But isn't it the lot? Isn't it the lot width that's causing the non-confirmation?
Well, it contributes to the non-conforming situation, because if your lot is not wide enough, you will have difficulty meeting the corner side yard requirement. Okay, so it plays into it. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't meet it. If you, for example, have a 30-foot lot width, you may still, I suppose, be able to meet it, or 30 feet is pretty minimal. See, a lot of these houses have non-conforming interior yards as well. So whereas if you conform the ordinance, you have a 5-foot interior side yard. If you're on a corner lot, you have a 15-foot corner side yard that takes up 20 feet of your lot area. If you have a 30-foot wide lot, you can't really build a house. If you have a 35-foot wide lot, you really can't build a house. Okay, so even if you meet the ordinance requirement of a 35-foot wide lot width and you're on a corner lot, chances are you really can't build a house. So I think applying these particular district regulations to this area, and in particular the subject property in question, really, it creates a hardship, yes, but it really is, I think, not good zoning policy as well. It doesn't relate to conditions that you have on the ground. I looked at building coverage for the immediate lots surrounding the property. Calculating lot coverage is more tedious, and I thought it was more important to look at the nearby lots. So, again, by using the GIS information proportional scaling, I've determined that the property to the south has, by coincidence, a 37.9% building coverage. The one further to the south is 36. This is 41.6. This is 34.1. You can tell just by eyeballing, or it appears that some of these lots would have really quite high building coverage when you look at the mass of the building versus the size of the lot. And so the building coverage for R1, the building coverage requirement for R1 is 30%, and I think there's widespread nonconformity with respect to building coverage in this area. So I think even more important than the material I presented is the fact that there are a number of existing corner lot houses that are already built that would be similar to this house, and in fact, this house would provide a greater degree of conformance than many of these houses I'm going to show you. So, this is the 2910 Park Place house. There's, especially when you consider that the lot line is probably at least a foot inside the sidewalk. This has hardly any corner side yard. It doesn't have enough to plant any shrubs there.
To clarify, these sites, these other properties that we're looking at here, are these all contained within your study area
yes,
that you
are.
outlined earlier?
Yes, they are.
Thank you.
And can you tell me what year that house was built?
I can't.
Okay.
It doesn't look...
Since 1993?
I couldn't say.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't look like it was built before the establishment of the zoning ordinance is one thing I think is safe to say. 28 there is a little wider lot than 2910 Lincolnwood. It has a minuscule corner side yard. 303 Park Place looks to be about a 25-foot wide lot. And again, I guess it has enough for a few shrubs in front, but not much. Very much right up against the lot line there. Some more, 3000 Thayer. 2705 Lincolnwood. This property here at 2658 Ewing, I think, is notable. It has a little bit more corner side yard. Certainly doesn't meet the standard of 15 feet, but it looks like there was a very substantial second-story addition put onto that house, which would constitute an expansion of a non-conforming structure, and this would have to have been approved by the city. So it appears like there is some recognition of this kind of hardship and allowing increased development on property like that. I'm not asking for an interior side yard variance, but I wanted you to note that yards on this particular block are quite tight. A lot of the yards are either 3 foot or less than 3 foot. I know from my survey that the house to the south, his interior side yard adjacent to our common lot line is less than 3 feet. So the yards here are very tight, and frankly, I managed to create a proposal where I meet the interior side yard of 5 feet. The non-conforming garage due to corner side yard is another thing I wanted to point out. There are a lot of garages in the neighborhood that do not have the 15-foot corner side yard for the garage. This exists in many places in the neighborhood. My proposal would not be any different or any more egregious than these existing houses. So now I want to talk about neighbor outreach. Staff recommended, and I certainly wholeheartedly agreed to conduct outreach to the neighbors and see if we could find a design that would be acceptable to both me and to them. I started by mailing copies of preliminary plans to all properties within the notice area. Asked for feedback, email feedback, and I would follow up with them. I received a mix of supportive and negative responses. Certainly the negative responses were more numerous than the supportive responses. I held a meeting with the neighbors, those who wanted to attend the meeting, obviously, on the 22nd of June in 2016, and presented 3 alternative designs. And you have a packet there that shows the ideas that I presented. So these were ideas, and the thought was, let's talk about 3 different ways of organizing a house on that lot and see if one of these ideas was more preferable than the others. Okay? And so one of these was the attached garage concept. And the main benefit of this would be to reduce building coverage because the biggest floor plate need was on the second floor for the 3 bedrooms and the 2 baths. And you could position that space over the garage and reduce your overall lot coverage. And so that certainly was a distinguishing characteristic of this proposal. On the negative side was that in order to create really a 2-car garage, you have to push that to the interior of the lot and come close to the interior side yard of the property to the south, closer than 3 feet, frankly. And so that was a negative for this. Also, neighbors objected to having a driveway off of Hartzell. That there's traffic, could be a traffic problem backing out onto Hartzell and so forth. So that was another negative for that. I thought, it had some merit. I would have liked the plan that I've gone with better, but if the neighbors had really gotten behind this proposal, I would have gone with it. I also identified what I thought would be the variances that would be needed. This is not official, was probably not entirely 100% accurate, but what I thought would be the variances needed. So, sorry, this is the detached garage concept. Yeah, I failed to change the label here. This is the detached garage concept, and it's comparable to one that you have. The one that you have has reduced the building coverage for the house kind of substantially. You can see that this proposal, which is kind of what I was starting out with, this western portion of the building, the 16-foot wide portion of the building, is pretty much equal with the back of the house to the south, and the proposal that you have, there's probably only the back of the house sticks out only 4 or 5 feet probably from that house to the south. So there was substantial reduction in the size of the house from the very early concept. It actually required fewer variances than the attached garage concept, which was certainly important to me. I also looked at, and again, I forgot to change the label here. This is the 2.5-story concept. I thought, okay, what if I put 1 bedroom, 2 baths on the second floor, put a 3rd bedroom on the half-story above, shrunk the floor plate of the house a little bit? Would that be, preferable to having a longer house on only 2 floors? And this was probably the least well-received house of the 3. Okay. Now, the result of the meeting was essentially a unified position. This is my interpretation. A unified position on the part of the opposing neighbors that no design would be acceptable, that this house should never have a house on it, certainly not a house on this lot alone. And so there was really no point of kind of discussion or compromise or working anything out, because their position was that no house should be built here. I want to say that there are some neighbors who support the proposal. This is a redacted email from a neighbor. Early on, there was much more, I guess, positive support than after the opposition really got organized and kind of made it known probably that if you support something like this, you're going to, not be looked at with favor by the opposition, frankly. This neighbor, like others in the neighborhood, thought it would be much better to have a nice, attractive house on the property than a vacant lot. The homeowner across Reese, who was putting his house up for sale at the time that I started this, and he may have already sold his house, but he told me verbally that he preferred a house on the lot rather than a vacant lot, and he would support the proposal. I cut the grass myself at the property, and a couple walking their dog stopped me while I was cutting the grass and said, "Do you own the property?" I said, "Yes, I do." And they said, "We just want you to know that we would like to see a house built here, rather than this vacant lot, being here forever." So when people go out of their way to stop me when they see me and tell me that they would like to see a nice house built on the lot, I think there are, frankly, more people like that in the neighborhood. I did not go out and try to drum up support, which would effectively pit one group of neighbors against another. Frankly, I don't know, didn't see in the ordinance where neighbor objection is part of the rationale for deciding a variance. So I thought I would let the merits of the proposal speak for themselves, and to let you know that there are probably a lot of neighbors who actually would support the building of a house here. This lot has been vacant for many years. There's been many opportunities for other people to buy it, including the neighbor to the south or somebody else who would buy it and combine it with a house to the south. That hasn't happened. I don't think that's going to happen. And I think this is the best option for getting a productive use on that lot and a nice house. So now I'm going to talk about relation to the variance standards. So while it's useful to look at the proposal in its entirety, what we really have is a series of individual variance requests. and I think it's necessary to talk about each of them individually. These are the standards, which I'm sure you know well. With respect to building coverage, okay, I'm asking for 37.9%. 30 is required in R1. So this variation will not have a substantial adverse impact on the use and enjoyment of adjacent property. There's one adjacent property, as the ordinance defines adjacent property. That's the property to the south. That property has a comparable level of building coverage to this property. Now, obviously, this is a vacant lot, and that property owner enjoys, whatever benefits accrue to having a vacant lot next to him, and that would be very nice to have. But I think that is not an impact because he has no entitlement to enjoy or to have that lot be preserved in open space forever. So I would say that, and also the proposed building coverage, as I've demonstrated here on this proposal, is comparable to other properties in the surrounding area. Number two, the property owner would suffer particular hardship or practical difficulty distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the strict letter of the regulations were to be carried out. Obviously, I'm saying that you cannot build a house here without some relief in building coverage. And so it would be a major hardship, not an inconvenience, if this variance were denied. The variation is not based exclusively on a desire to extract additional income. I think I've demonstrated that my proposal is not based on maximizing income, not maximizing profit. I've been very balanced in terms of trying to reduce the house size as much as possible, minimize both the degree of variance and the number of variances requested. The alleged hardship or practical difficulty has not been self-created. In fact, the hardship was created by the subdivision of land creating this lot and the establishment of zoning regulations that make it infeasible to develop the lot without relief from the building coverage requirement. Have other alternatives been considered, and why will they not work? So I've pointed out the three other alternatives that I've talked about. In addition, I've made substantial revisions to the plan that you have to shrink it down to its current size. So I have really minimized building coverage, I believe, as much as possible. So now we move on to the street side yard variance. Will this have a substantial adverse impact on the use and enjoyment of the adjacent property? Well, the street side yard is on the opposite side from the adjacent property. It's on the north side of my lot, and he's to the south side. So I think by virtue of that alone, the reduction in the street side yard will not have an adverse impact on that adjacent property owner. One can talk about, will it have impact on people across the street or whatever. That's not the standard in the zoning ordinance. And I would say that there are several other, I've shown several other houses that have comparable or even greater degrees of variation from the corner side yard or the street side yard than what I'm proposing. Particular hardship as opposed to practical difficulty. Well, without relief from...
May I just ask, sorry, that first standard, I believe, should be the adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, or property values of adjacent properties. Is there a reason you excluded property values, or is that just inadvertent?
I thought I copied this from the application, and if it should include property values, I apologize, and I will address that. Okay? So...
Can you address it?
Yes, I can address it. So both with respect to building coverage and with respect to street side yard, I do not see this having an adverse impact on property values for two reasons. First of all, frankly, I think the property I'm building will be of much higher value than the adjacent property is. And secondly, if this property would diminish property values for the adjacent property, other properties similarly developed on corner lots with various ranges of nonconformity would also have diminished property value. So I think the condition that I am requesting already exists in the neighborhood, and therefore, because it already exists, it's not going to diminish property values. With respect to the standard number 2, without relief from the street side yard requirement, no house can be built here. 15-foot corner side yard requirement renders this lot absolutely unbuildable. The variation is not based exclusively on a desire to extract additional income. So again, I've pursued a very balanced approach to minimize variations and the degree of variation needed. If I were trying to maximize, I would be coming to you with, frankly, a larger house with more amenities than what I'm doing.
To that point, can you clarify what the lot coverage was in the previous, what the lot coverage under the previous proposal with the former owner? Or maybe that's a question for staff.
I'm sorry, what?
The lot coverage in the proposal with the previous owner, the one that received, according to the applicant, received DAPR approval and was pulled before it came before the zoning board.
I know they had a 3-foot interior side yard. I think they had actually a smaller corner side yard than I.
I believe they did, and they did request building lot coverage. I don't remember what it was offhand.
I think that alone suggests a substantial increase. I doubt that they met, I would almost bet my life that they didn't meet the standard for minor variation.
Can you compare the square footage of your project versus the square footage of the former project? Do you know that information?
You know, I looked at the former project. I didn't come prepared to speak to that. I mean, it never made its way,
right
to the ZBA. I know that it was much bigger. It was this person's dream house, and they liked the neighborhood. They found a way to buy the lot, and I thought they designed the dream house and then tried to put it on the lot rather than so. The person actually went to Glenview, bought a much bigger lot, and built the same house in Glenview. So it was a much bigger house. I'm sure of that.
That I would agree with, that the previous applicant was not willing to make revisions to reduce variations.
The hardship has not been self-created. Again, I'll be repetitious here, but it was the subdivision of the land and the zoning regulations that create the hardship. I've done nothing to create the hardship.
You've mentioned that a couple of times now. How do you know when the land was subdivided?
Well, it may be on the legal description on my survey. However, it's state law that municipalities approve every subdivision. So every subdivision of land, I've re-subdivided land in Evanston. It always goes before the Plan Commission and gets on the City Council agenda.
Sure, but there's a difference between subdividing land in 1921 and subdividing land in 1973, or 1993 or later. So that's why I'm asking.
Well, I'm not sure what the difference is. It's still a subdivision. We're creating land in these shapes and sizes, and the city is responsible for promoting the orderly development of land in the community. And so, and there may have been different standards at that time, but the city still approved the subdivision of land in this shape and size, created this 25-foot lot, as well as other 25-foot lots. The others have all been developed, and this is the only one left. And so, frankly, those properties were accommodated in some form or fashion, and this one is the last one. Yes, other alternatives have been considered, but nothing will work with a 15-foot street side yard on this lot. The garage. Okay, so 3 foot is proposed, 15 is required, and this will not have an adverse impact on the use and enjoyment and property values of adjacent property, the property to the south. I am maintaining the required 3-foot interior side yard for an accessory structure on that property line, adjacent to that property, and so I don't see that this will impact his use and enjoyment. and I do not believe it'll have an adverse impact on property values because there are numerous other garages positioned like mine will be within the neighborhood, and so whatever condition exists, it's already had its effect on property values. This would be a particular hardship as opposed to or practical difficulty as distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the letter of the regulations were to be carried out. So a two-car garage is impossible on this lot without relief from the street side yard requirement. I actually investigated building a one-car garage with a parking pad next to it, and it turns out that I would need a slew of variances for the parking pad next to the garage. I would need more variances for that than I would for a two-car garage. So I really tried to minimize this, but it wasn't possible. And so really no further reduction from the 19-foot width would be possible in still preserving a two-car garage.
To clarify, so you said you considered a one-car garage. By code, the city requires one off-street parking?
2 spaces, whether open or enclosed.
2 spaces.
Yeah, this is not based exclusively on a desire to extract additional income. Frankly, a two-car garage is a standard part of the program. It's not extravagant. It is not, the request is not based on a desire to extract additional income. The alleged hardship or practical difficulty was not self-created. Going back to the statement I've made before, that the creation of the lot and the zoning regulations that applied to it have created the hardship, not me. And other alternatives have been considered. I just mentioned the one-car garage idea, but it was more problematic than having a two-car garage. So I apologize for, I'm going to be spending an abnormal amount of time on this porch. When I investigated it, it kind of led me to some things that I found very peculiar. So, as I said, I didn't know I had a variance of a variance for a porch 1 foot off the property line. I thought I had this projection for the canopy, 18-inch projection where only 5 inches would be allowed. So I looked into the ordinance and I looked for the definition of a porch and found this. I think the substantive portion of the definition is area attached to the building and located between the exterior wall of the building and the right-of-way. So this is a screenshot of the definition of a porch from the Evanston zoning ordinance. So, I have an image of what a porch looks like in my mind. I can't kind of reconcile it with what this definition says. And frankly, you could construe this to hold that anything that exists between the front of the house and the street side yard would be a porch. So I think it's very ambiguous. I don't think, hopefully it's not a big issue with you. I would be happy to try to minimize this or eliminate this. I also thought it was curious, other references in the zoning ordinance for porch references identified this as linked it with permanently roofed over terraces or porches. So this seems to suggest that a porch is a roofed over structure. But these are little idiosyncrasies of zoning. So what I'm really looking for is this front door canopy projecting 18 inches from the face of the building that's 9 feet 6 inches wide. I think it's very important to have, an accentuation of the entrance to the building and the most minimal of overhead cover for somebody entering the building. If you're fumbling for your keys in the rain, you should have a little bit of overhead protection. I think it's nice to provide a decorative feature for the house as well, and I think 18 inches is really a minimal obstruction to accomplish that. I want just a single front door stoop, no more than 8 inches high, 3 feet wide, and 9 feet 6 inches long. The post extending from the canopy to the stoop can be eliminated. If that, I think you didn't get a chance to reply to my email, but I'm not sure what really makes it a porch. But if those posts coming down to the stoop make it a porch, I can eliminate those. a minor thing, but I'm willing to do what I can. And this is the I think the last zoning list that I received, which talked about this obstruction that I was expecting to have as a variance rather than a porch 1 foot from the property line. So these are the examples of what could be similar obstructions that exist in other houses. So these are all non-conforming either front yards or corner side yards, and they have steps that extend down, whether they're 1 foot away from, I think this one is probably right at the lot line here. This one is right at the lot line. This might be a couple feet away. But these exist in many instances throughout the neighborhood. So what I'm asking for here is actually less of an obstruction than what exists in many other houses within this area. So just going with the proposal as it is, this variance request will not have a substantial adverse impact on the use and enjoyment of adjacent property or property values. This is really an appurtenance to the building. It's not substantial. It's not going to have a material effect either way on the use and enjoyment of other people's property or property values. It's very comparable to other existing appurtenances on houses in the area, and so it will not have an adverse impact. The property owner would suffer a particular hardship or practical difficulty distinguished from mere convenience if the strict letter of the regulations would be carried out. So, again, I'm not entirely sure what I would be allowed if the strict letter of the ordinance would be carried out. Could I have the stoop? Can I have the canopy or the canopy gone? I think both the stoop and the canopy, frankly, are necessary. Consider somebody buying a house and there's absolutely no overhead articulation of the facade at the entrance. There's no step up from the sidewalk. The sidewalk is 4 feet away from your house, and you don't even have a step up to get to your front door. So I think those are significant, hardships and practical difficulties if the strict letter of the regulations would be carried out. It's not based on a desire to extract additional income. It's just basic good house design, and this is something that would be standard on any other house that you see. The hardship has not been self-created. The hardship goes back to the size of the lot and the street side yard requirement that makes anything in front of that house an obstruction. Okay, so I couldn't really do anything without violating this aspect of the ordinance. Have other alternatives been considered? So I mentioned removing the porch posts, if that makes a difference. I suppose it would be possible not to have a front stoop, not to have any kind of canopy over the front door. I think that is unacceptable. I'd rather not go there, and I think this is the most minor of the variations anyway. If you're inclined to approve the other variations, I think you'd approve this one. And I think, now for my summary. So I would like to impress the fact, everybody else I've talked to besides the zoning board, other people in the zoning business say, you're going in for variance, so what's your hardship? Well, it's a non-conforming lot 25 feet wide. And oh, yeah, you definitely got a hardship. I think if you ask 10 zoning experts, if this is a hardship, this is a hardship. Okay? I very much think that this proposal represents a balanced approach, and frankly, you can see the progression of the house design from the very beginning to where it is now, and it has been substantially reduced. And other alternatives have been considered to both minimize the number of variances requested and the degree of variances requested for those that have been requested. I think the house still yields a livable house. I think going anything smaller than this really would not make it livable. It seeks a much lower degree of variance than that filed by the former owner, which received this favorable DAPR committee review. I do think the classification of the area as R1 is not consistent with existing lot and yard conditions. far more consistent with R2. If I had R2, I'd need no building coverage variation. Importantly, the proposed house will be very consistent with the character of the area. I've shown you examples of other houses on corner lots that have a very small street side yard, and this would be, frankly, more attractive and more in conformance with the ordinance than many of those examples that I showed you. Evanston has no stated policy that lots such as this subject property are unbuildable. If the city had told me, no, you're never going to get a variance, don't bother with this, or it's not written, but this is unbuildable, I would not have pursued this. So I think it is incumbent on, frankly, the ZBA to recognize that this is the city's policy and that this is a consideration in your deliberations. So obviously neighbors have, in my meeting with them, raised several objections, and yeah, I'm sure you're going to hear them. As I see it, these objections have nothing to do with the standards for variance in the zoning ordinance. One property owner several lots away said, well, you're going to increase flooding on my property. Another said, well, the garage...
It's an oversimplification to say they have nothing to do with the standards, because the standards include an adverse impact on the adjoining properties. So if neighbors have objections, that's their voicing their opinion, right or wrong, that the development or variations will have some sort of adverse impact on them.
I suppose if you interpret it that way. I thought the ordinance was clear in that the adverse impact is on or any adjacent properties defined as having a common lot line.
Sure, but it's not, to say it has nothing to do with the standards is not right.
Okay. This idea of combining the subject property with the lot to the south really is not a viable option. I don't think it should be part of your deliberations. I think it's really subterfuge, and if it were viable, it would have been done before. The standards for variance do not require a perfect design, a perfect proposal. I think there is probably no such thing in this instance. One person may think, well, yeah, I think it should be, a little smaller, a little less tall, or I don't like the bay window, or the entrance could be better, any number of things. But that's really not, again, part of the standards. I think this is, a balanced approach, and it is a viable approach for building on this lot. The older homes in the area do not represent a standard for denying the request. So the idea that, neighbors have two-bedroom houses, for example, you should have a two-bedroom house. Well, I would say that it makes no sense to spend $2,018 creating a house that is to a standard of 75 years ago. And I wouldn't do that. It would not be marketable, it would not be a wise use of funds, and I don't think that has anything to do with the request that I'm making. The lot will generate needed property tax revenue to fund schools, city government, and other public services. This lot has been vacant for a long time. One of the purposes of the zoning ordinance is to enhance the taxable value of property. This proposal would do that. New moderately priced homes are needed in Evanston. I build new homes, and frankly, the first one I sold for $325,000 some 25 years ago, didn't make any money on it, but no new home is priced at that level anymore. So it would be great to get a nice new home at a more moderate price in this part of Evanston. And if you approve the...
Can I clarify, to make that statement, do you want to support that statement by suggesting what this house will be sold for? Because my definition of a moderately priced home may differ.
Yeah, I think there are different definitions you can have. I'm certainly not talking about the low mod definition that HUD uses, for example.
Certainly you're aware of that. There's a lot of discussion in the community about the need for affordable housing, and this statement seems to speak to that, but I would suggest that we're not talking about affordable housing here.
Well, we're not talking about affordable housing. This is market rate housing, and affordable housing, almost by definition, is not market rate housing. So I don't know what the average or medium sales price of a house in Evanston is. Can somebody from the audience speak to that?
They can address that later.
Okay. But I would guess that this house will sell for between $500,000 and $600,000. I would love it if it was at the higher end of the range. This house is not going to have all the bells and whistles, not going to have all the amenities that a lot of buyers will be looking for. It's going to be a compromise house, both in terms of dollar and in terms of features. So I don't think I'll get top dollar for this house. And, I'm willing to live with that. If you approve the house, it will result in a beautiful home, very attractive house that will be an aesthetic amenity to the neighborhood and will be a great home for future generations of families. And I've concluded my presentation.
Great.
Mercifully.
Thank you very
or
much.
not.
Thank you very much. It's very thorough. We're going to ask you to stay up
Okay.
because the board's going to have some questions now. So who's got questions? That isn't me.
I'll start with what I think was obvious from the presentation. You don't plan to live in the house, correct?
Oh, no.
You bought the lot and plan to develop it and sell it?
Yes, that's
Do you
all
live
the
in-
22. The first house that I built, I've lived in. I still live in it. Okay.
You live in Evanston?
I live in Evanston, yes. And the other 22 houses I have built and sold. And I think, frankly, building this as a spec house is the better approach rather than a custom house because you build what can be accommodated on the lot, what will meet the zoning standards, and then you find a buyer who likes that house, who loves that house. And so that's what I think is the right approach to building on this lot, rather than designing it to live in it or designing it as a custom home for somebody else. The prior owner was a custom home buyer, occupant, and that did not work at all.
Do you have a buyer for this?
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
I mean, I would not even, how do I say this, venture into that territory without getting a positive recommendation. I'm sure that there would be demand for this house, this type of house in this neighborhood at that price.
Some of the concerns that were outlined by neighbors related to impacts on the south adjacent property, construction impacts, and then impacts in terms of flooding in the neighborhood. Can you speak to both of those issues?
Sure. So with respect to construction-related impacts on the property to the south, so number one, I'm conforming to all of the yard requirements adjacent to that property, just like any other home builder would have to comply with. So the variations I'm requesting have no direct impact on construction impacts on that adjacent property. Secondly, I will abide by all city best practices for construction and minimizing damage. For example, shoring and providing engineered shoring calculations so that there is no subsidence on the adjacent property. I will have a construction fence up. I will ensure that debris does not infiltrate the adjacent property. I will monitor the construction activity to make sure my subcontractors are conscientious and doing the right thing. In terms of flooding, a grading plan is required for every new house constructed, and that grading plan has to factor in the location of downspouts and the direction of drainage, and to drain my runoff away from the adjacent property. Given that this is a corner lot, I see absolutely no difficulty in draining all of the runoff to either street or the alley, and so there should be no runoff going to the south.
Other concerns that were outlined, and I'm not sure that I totally understand this issue yet, so perhaps you can help me understand. I understand there's a safety concern as the way the garage relates to the sidewalk, I believe, is for pedestrian safety. And then there was also a concern in terms of how the alley is used. Is it used by commercial traffic right now from Central Street?
I
Is
don't
it
have
only for
personal
the
knowledge of that. I
the
mean,
sole
obviously,
use of-
this alley tees into the alley behind Central Street. I would hope that there is not commercial traffic going down this segment of the alley. I wouldn't want to have that as a condition I have to contend with when I sell the house. I'd be surprised if that's the case, but I don't know. I think with respect to the garage, I think it's a question of sight distance. And yes, you'd have more sight distance if there were a 15-foot setback. As I said, there are numerous other garages that don't have a 15-foot setback on the street. And if you were going to have pedestrian accidents or vehicles running into cars because of that, I think you would have seen it happen. And there would be a track record of these kinds of accidents because these other garages are similarly located. So I don't see that as really a viable objection. Anything is possible, but there is not, to my knowledge, a track record of that kind of a situation having occurred from the existing garages similarly located.
And clarify for me, you spoke of the mature trees that are on the parkway and
Yes.
how they enhance the property. Is there a loss of trees in the development of the property?
I'm proposing no elimination of trees within the parkway.
And on site itself, I can't recall, are there mature trees on the site?
There are what I would consider volunteer and weed trees, mulberries, and I'm not sure exactly what else, underbrush.
Yeah.
And frankly, that stuff should be eliminated. I didn't, in all the time I've got the grass there, I don't think there's one tree that merits saving. In fact, I would add, as shown in my landscape plan, I would add quality trees into the yard and take out the volunteer trees that really are not attractive.
I have two questions. First, you're mentioning here different concept options, and we saw that. Have you considered something radically different, like split levels or attic type of second floor?
Well, the 2.5-story concept considered an attic space. I have to say that the neighbors dislike that the most.
I'm asking not for 2.5. I'm asking for 1.5.
Oh, 1.5. So, I didn't develop a plan because I thought it was actually completely infeasible. I don't know where you would put 3 bedrooms and 2 baths on the same level on a half-story, given the width that I have, 16 feet. Now, if you were to go 20 feet wide, maybe you could do it, okay, or even more. But I think in deference to minimizing the variances, for example, maintaining that interior side yard at 5 feet, I think that is, frankly, more important than asking for a variance for height, and so I think that held precedent over the kind of option that you're talking about.
On one of the concepts, your grading line is shown tilted towards the street. On the other concepts, it's flat. What is the real situation? Do you have a slope?
I know nothing about the grading of the site. It looks pretty flat to me. If there's a line on one of those concepts, it is not a grading line. It is not a topo line. I don't have topo for the site. I haven't ordered topo for the site. It wasn't part of my survey. So I don't believe that is a grading line.
And finally, is this really the minimal viable option for you regarding profit?
Well, I look at it first in terms of what's a viable product I think I can market. And I've made a lot of compromises on this already. I would love a mudroom in this house. I don't have space for a mudroom, okay? I had it on other plans. I had to take it off to achieve the additional reduction in building coverage that DAPR requested. I would like all the bedrooms to be at least 10 feet wide. I got one at 9. Frankly, the other one might not even be 10 feet wide. So those are compromises that have been made. The closet space has been compromised, other things like that. I'd like a little more space in front of the stairs. I reduced that portion of the building to 13 feet wide, again, to meet the reduction in building coverage that DAPR requested. So I don't see how I could get 10 more square feet off that and still preserve the program that is really marketable.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. All right. We're going to give you a break. You can have a seat. I just want to throw this out. It's 10:15. We have not heard from neighbors. Do we feel like continuing with this or continuing this meeting to a date certain? Hey, please, no, you can't talk without.
I would suggest
from the board.
I would suggest that we take a show of hands as to how many people want to submit testimony this evening. They've sat through, as have we, 3 hours of meeting, and you know I'm an early to bed kind of person. However, I think it's our role to encourage neighbors and other interested parties to submit testimony when they're interested in a zoning proposal. So I'm inclined to carry forward with the request that those that are wanting to submit testimony to do so in a shortened time frame that could be agreeable to the board so that we can hear, at the very least, hear everyone that has come out tonight. And then if we think I don't know if we think there's going to be a lengthy discussion period, we could break at that point because we have heard testimony from those that have come out this evening.
I agree with Lisa. I think that we should hear the neighbors, and then if that's a good breaking point, that might be the point where we stop.
I agree.
I agree too, but let me encourage the neighbors. You all have a right to be heard, but listen to each other and try not to make redundant comments. We don't need to hear the same comments more than once because we really just want to hear what the issues are.
Before you do this,
hang on.
he made redundant comments, and I don't want us to make them, but I do want to put that on the record that the builder made many redundant comments, and I don't want any of us to do that. I would prefer to go with what you're saying.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So then the vote from the board is that we continue and we allow the residents, the neighbors, to have their chance to comment, and then at that point we continue to a date certain. Now, Melissa just told me that the next meeting, jam-packed, so we would need to continue it to a special meeting.
Well, let's just see where we are after the neighbor comments.
Okay, we will revisit in 10 minutes. All right, so now we are open for neighbor comment. I don't really want to go through the list because I can't barely read your handwriting. So in orderly fashion, feel free to come up, give me your name and address.
Mary Beth.
In a perfect world, we would keep the comments to 3 minutes. Oh. And if you agree, it's okay to just come up and say, I agree with everything that person said.
All right. First of all, I am Richard Horsting. I am the person that lives south of this property. To make a long story short, this property was owned by the Welch family for over 70 years. I have 3 grandparents that are the oldest family members in Evanston, Wilmette, Glenview. My grandmother, who lived in this house for 45 years, is part of the Wagner farm family. Descendant from 1850. Labach, her husband, from 1860, and Bauer, my father's family, from 1860. So I defy anybody to say anything. I've owned the house. My grandmother's family built the house in 1926. They lost it. My family's relatives built the house in 1926. They lost it during the Depression, and my grandmother and grandfather were proud enough to buy it on D-Day 1944. She lived there for 40 years. For 40 years, she fought the Welch family that owned this corner lot. The Welch family approached me at least 40 times in the 31 years I've been there trying to get me to sell my house so they could tear it down and build a house. When I asked them if I'd get my money back, they said, no, not really, but we'll make a profit. I certainly want to state that I want to give Mr. James the truth instead of some of these things that he's been talking about, because I've never been approached. My attorney was approached about possibly selling, never directly to me. Is there any way I can give you, everybody, a copy of this here?
Yes,
Okay.
bring it up, and we're going to mark that Exhibit B. Give it to me.
That is a picture from 2000 showing the house, the lot that I took care of for 30 years and cut the yard. And if I may say something, Mr. James has cut the yard only twice in the last year and a half. And he had not shoveled the snow for the last month and a half unless that little bit he did this week was evident. His plans really don't show the house proportion and what's actually here. I'd like to present this to the board too, because this actually shows the grandfather.
Sorry, can I just ask you
Sure,
to
you
clarify
certainly
what
can.
we're looking at? Is the picture you handed us, is this your house or
It
is
is
this?
my house, and
Okay.
actually I'm privileged to have every neighbor that surrounds that lot. Every neighbor's been here tonight, absolutely everyone is
Okay,
here present.
you answered me.
Okay.
Thank you.
The house next to that is luckily owned by the Clark family who lived there for many, many years. They moved up 3 houses away, and now Jeff and Colleen own the house next to me to the south.
I didn't mean to take you off
Okay, it's
track.
okay.
I just wanted to know
All
what
right.
the picture
So,
was.
Anyway, but if you look at that front porch, that's grandfathered non-conforming. It's not heated. Mr. James proposes to not only project this well in front of what zoning laws allow, but please take a look at the real picture here that I'm going to present to you, how much that goes in back of my yard. The encroachment on there is over 40% of my backyard.
If you wouldn't mind, if you'd like
Yeah.
that entered into the record, then I will take it, and we will mark this as Exhibit B, and it appears to be a site plan of the proposed house
And that's to scale too, by the way.
with the neighboring house to the south imposed next to it, so that you
Correct.
can see them next to each
Right.
other.
Also, I want to make a definition.
Exhibit C,
Okay.
my bad.
Okay. Also, I want to let people know that interior wall to my house, and you can see how small my house is, prior to his knowledge, it's only 740 square feet. So when you take that in a 200 square foot garage and you divide 900 square feet into 3,300, I'm well under 30%. So when he's saying that my house is taking up the 38% his is, it couldn't be further from the truth. The thing that disturbs me the most is this house, my house from inside wall to inside wall is 18 feet, 4 inches wide. That's from the interior living room wall to the interior living room wall. What he proposes, his house is only 16 feet wide, and he admitted that it's going to be 14 feet interior-wise. That's going to be 16 foot wide, 30 feet tall, 40 feet long down the block. It's just beyond belief that anybody would even attempt to try and build a house on that. Over the years, there's been numerous times that people have tried to build there. No one's ever been allowed to do it. My home is grandfathered non-conforming. So is my neighbors to the south of me. They're both on 25-foot lots. The neighbors to the south of me's house was built in 1940, and they were not allowed to build a garage, as per my grandmother told me, because of the problems they would have in excavating too close to my house and next to the house to the south of them. So they have a beautiful home, which sold for a lot of money, gorgeous neighborhood, but now this gentleman who really didn't have any facts ready for you and has deceptively showed wrong stuff on the screen is a little bit disconcerting to me. One final thing I'm going to say here. This is a survey, not a survey. This is a permit approved by the city of Evanston exactly 20 years ago for the front porch that I built. I had the inspector, you can see the approvals, I had the inspector give me such grief in 1998 for 4 inches. 4 inches to the south of me, I wanted to pour the piers and build the steps. When he came out to do the inspection, he demanded I moved it over. I didn't apply for a variance, but this is just shocking to me that when I'm having a permit and I went to apply for it, that an inspector would give me total grief on 4 inches when we're asking for a person here to build an entire home. And if I may say one thing to you guys, and I'm going to stop. All the homes that he showed here were grandfathered, non-conforming. None of it's new construction. This is unheard of. If you follow the rules of the zoning regulations, and I have built personally 5 homes myself from ground up, not through other builders, that lot means that house could only be 5 feet wide, 15 feet from the sidewalk, 5 feet from mine. That means that's a 5-foot strip. He's asking for variances that I have never heard of. I didn't bring my attorney tonight. He said if this ever got extended, he will be glad to be there. He's Carl Udell in Northfield, Illinois. He sat on the Northbrook zoning and the Northfield zoning for over 20 years. I've known him for 60 years, and he would really enjoy having a talk with everybody here. That's all I have to say. Take in mind that my family's been here for 91 years at that location, and myself, I've lived there 31 years. To make a long story short, I'm the outdoor power equipment manager at a huge local building store up in Northbrook, Illinois. And one of the things I tell everybody all the time is, does anybody know what the difference is between a house and a home? And everybody comes up with a bunch of different answers, and they go, well, it's a house. I say, no, the difference is, at the end of a long day of work, you don't say, I'm going house. You say, I'm going home. I live in a home. My neighbors all live in a home. This man's trying to build a house. Thank you.
One point of...
Hold on just a second, sir.
Oh, go ahead. One question. I believe it was suggested earlier by the applicant or alluded to the suggestion or the consideration that perhaps you might be interested or, my question is this. Do you have any interest or the means to purchase?
Yes, I do. I also was offered, and I just showed Mr. Kirkpatrick a letter from John Adamson, a well-known realtor from the Welch family in 2012. And if I may give a little bit of history, very short history on this.
I'm not sure we need history. I really just want to understand.
Yes. But yes, I've been offered it from the Welches only at the end because they were going in a tax foreclosure, and that's how the first owner bought it. He came and literally threatened me at night to say he needed to talk to me at 9 o'clock at night, knowing he didn't have a chance to build. He sold it to the next couple who also had such opposition. They backed out 3 hours before this meeting. Then Mr. James purchased the property, knowing full well the hardships he's going to have trying to even build anything on it, because there isn't a neighbor surrounding that property that I know of, I will not speak for them, that wants to have anything built on that lot. I would be in position to it, but if you think I'm going to pay what he's going to be asking for, it's not going to happen. So, anybody else?
Anyone else have other questions for Mr. Horsting? No, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. All right, who's next? If you can give us your name and your address, please.
My name is David Losey, 2644 Lincolnwood Drive. It's been a very interesting evening just listening to everything what's going on, and we have a bigger problem just beside this lot, as the gentleman has showed us. The way our neighborhood was made over 100 years ago was very bizarre at best. We are living that nightmare now because we have a lot of homes. I've been here 20 years, and in my neighborhood, homes are either coming down and being rebuilt, or they're renovating and spending a tremendous amount of money because we want to stay here because it's a great town. But these little houses on these small blocks are an issue. And it's just not going to be this one. It's going to be the ones that he pointed around. I have 2 or 3 on my block. And maybe this is something you folks at a later time can start talking about, zoning changes of saying if you're going to build a house here, it's got to be the size of what it is now. This gentleman over here, his house is a small house. And the house next to it is a small house. Then the rest of the houses are 2-story brick. So think about that house. And to me, this house looks like a row house. If those 2 houses next door to this side of the houses were taken down, they would virtually look like row, row, row. And that's what I'm afraid is going to happen. And we don't have this in our neighborhood. And I don't want apartment styles, houses. And I appreciate what you've done with the design. I think the design isn't bad. But regardless it's 18 feet, 20 feet wide. It looks like a row house. So all I encourage you folks is, whatever the decision is with this, we have to think about what's going to happen next week, next year, when these other folks that have lived there a long time want to sell their lots. Now, my value of my home is worth a lot of money. I have a home across the street that went up. It's sold just a little under $1 million. And when you say that when people sell a house, they're going to look and say, what does the average two-story house cost? That house is going to be thrown in. This is what my realtor is talking about. And if you don't think that's adverse, it might not affect him, but it's going to affect me. Because right now, we don't have the type of house that I have, and it's difficult to try to figure out exactly how much it's worth. And they need more two-story houses that look like mine. But when you have something like that, people aren't going to know it. They're just going to throw it in. Realtors are going to grab 5 or 6 houses and say, well, this is the average. So all I say is in the future, please, we need to look at this. We need to fix it before it gets worse. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, sir. Name and address, please.
Scott Kirkpatrick, 2904 Hartzell Street. I'm the house right off the alley. And while there were a number of things that the applicant said that are concerning, particularly the fact that there was not neighborhood or that he didn't feel like it was important or even relevant to have neighborhood impact, I think it is very important and relevant, and I think he was quite clear about that. The other thing I would say is that one thing this has done is galvanized our neighborhood and to stand together for our neighbor, particularly Mr. Horstig, but more importantly to make sure that there's reasonable development. And so it's upon reasonable development that I'd like to talk about quickly. As the code states, the variation should not be based exclusively upon the desire to extract additional income from the property. The applicant states in his application that he does not seek to maximize additional income, but rather to generate the minimum financial gain. In fact, you asked a question. You asked a question about the cost of his house. So, you know, in our meeting, he told us he'd hoped to sell it for $200 a square foot. And so if you build it for $150, you know, he was trying to make about $150,000 on it. Okay. We know from public records that the prior owner paid $45,000 for this parcel. And for some reason, 18 months afterwards, he paid $75,000. Again, public record. So the question is, if he doesn't intend to generate income from this property, from these variances, why would he spend $30,000 more than market value for the property? I would contend his exclusive purpose of building this is to extract additional income. He was not forced to buy this property. He did not own this property. He bought it exclusively to generate income for himself. And my understanding of the variance is that major variances should not be granted in that case.
Just to be clear, sir, there is, obviously, we grant variances to developers all the time. It's not specifically against the rules for granting a variance to allow someone to make a profit. However, when there is a profit that is being made, there must be a public benefit. And so the burden falls on him to prove what a public benefit is.
And so then I would say, I didn't hear any public benefit. And
fair enough. I just wanted to explain that to you.
Right.
Okay.
But he has, you know, in each one of his variances, each one of his variances is based on deriving additional income, right? In fact, you know, when he said, what is the minimum? He could build a smaller house. He just wouldn't make as much money. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Who's next? Great. And your name and address, please.
Colleen Barkley. I'm at 2622 Reese, which is 2 lots down from the petitioner and next to Dick Horstein. So this isn't easy for all of us, and it's not easy for the petitioner, for the board, and us. And I just wanted to make my points more clarity to some of the things I heard wrong on behalf of the petitioner's presentation. As written in the Planning and Zoning Mission Statement, the daily focus of the division is improving and protecting the quality of life of Evanston residents. My concerns with this petition relate to the safety, which we've had much discussion about the garage. He had 2 slides up that had 2 property addresses, 3003 Park Place and 2910 Park Place. 3003 Park Place, I measured it last night because I'm as well a registered landscape architect, so I love my measuring tape. That garage is set back 10 feet from the sidewalk. 2910 Park Place, I know it well because I walk my dog by that, and that is obviously an older garage, and I can't tell you how many times I've almost gotten sideswiped because there's no sight triangle. Sight triangles are very important. They're to protect the vehicular and the pedestrian, right, like the walking and vehicle traffic. So I can't understand how a two-car garage could be allowed on the alley that I exit daily without encroaching the sidewalk to pass into the street. Secondly, stormwater management, which was touched on in questions. We all know we've experienced the increase in 100-year floods, and I just can't understand how allowing the amount of more impervious surface based on the proposal to be approved. Our yard, we've lived there 18 months now, and it turns into a pond. Every hard rainfall, it's a pond. And by allowing more impervious surface on the small green space would push more water. He says that the downspouts would be directed to the alley and to the street. Well, I know from practicing landscape architecture in Evanston, it's not allowed to connect to a street, and it's also code, referenced in 304.71. It requires 10 feet distance for them to splash or to be popped up on landscape. And my concern with this is the multiple freeze-thaw cycles that we have in our lovely Chicagoland weather, that to be a safety on the public walk because it won't get to the street without crossing the sidewalk. Also, the alley right now as it stands without building on this lot is flooded as well in heavy rainfalls with the two storms that are there from just the overland flow. The third point that I'd like to make is as part of the zoning code 6815, it says it must comply with chapter 16 landscaping and screening. And I appreciate the plan that the petitioner presented, but part of the code states that it's intended to help preserve, protect the appearance, character, and general health, well-being, and the safety of the city by ensuring the compatibility of different land uses. There are actually two heritage trees, one on my neighbor's property, Dick, that actually would be the critical root zone would be impacted by the proposed garage. It's actually a heritage oak. Secondly, there's a large heritage elm on the parkway. The parkway trees, I can't imagine how you could build that height without impacting and removing part of the crown of the trees, as well as the critical root zone that spreads across that property. This, to me, doesn't comply with the statement that is outlined in Chapter 17. Secondly, in that landscape plan, I have an issue with some of the plants. I think it's lovely that he's softening the appearance, but there are plants, particularly along the shared property to the south, that are invasive species. I think those are all my points. I hoped I did it fast enough, but the most important thing is my husband and I bought this home, a two-bedroom house, and yes, we're, I guess, maybe of the minority, but it didn't feel that day. We were in a competitive bid situation for a two-bedroom house. There is a need for two-bedroom houses in Evanston. Not everybody can hop into a 3 or 4 bedroom house, and there is a need for starter homes in the area, and we found this one. We feel fortunate to be in this neighborhood, and this neighborhood is what we fell in love with, and I'm just asking you to disapprove this application on the sake of the health, safety, and welfare of our community and our environment. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm short, so I'll bring this down. My name is Allison Stark. I live at 2620 Reese with my husband and 2 small children. I'm located 3 doors down from this property. I have to agree with the issues with the commercial alley. So what I was one of the people who mentioned that. We have a lot of commercial traffic from Sky Nails employees, from Evanston Glass, not so much from Hartigan's, Brian's Garage sometimes, and when Rose's was there, we would have a lot of people use our alley. We'd also have a lot of pedestrian walking to and from work work at those locations. So I often see clusters of the women, especially from Sky Nails, walking up and down our alleyway. I am very concerned about when I exit my alleyway to take my son to Willard and my other child to preschool of not being able to see the sidewalk. There are many times when I'm coming this way and Sky Nails employees are crossing me because I leave when they kind of come. And then you've got kids walking and all of those things. So that's a significant concern for me, and I feel like it must be taken into account. A two-car garage, I just don't see how it can be placed on the property safely. And the second is in regards to the drainage. I won't go into that. I think Colleen has done a wonderful job to talk about that. And finally, I think this is my most pressing point, is that this proposal does not represent the minimum extent of variances that are needed to build this home. This, he talks about wanting to market to families. On the one hand, there's this argument that he shouldn't be, the standards of 75 years ago should not be used for him now. He should be able to build up to the sidewalk. He should be able to have all of these variances because this was appropriate 75 years ago. But he should build a house that's appropriate for now. So he wants the best of both worlds. And I think that's what's the hardest for me to understand and agree with. This is a 4-bedroom house. It has 3 bathrooms. It has a walk-in master closet. It has a walk-in laundry room. I don't have a walk-in laundry room. It has a dining room. It has a rec room. This is a huge house. And I think, I looked also at the 17 properties surrounding this area, and most of the homes are between 1,500 and 1,800 square feet. This is about a 2,800 square foot home, at least, and I'm obviously not an expert, and I might not have, calculated that correctly, but this is a huge home. There are only 2 other homes in the 17 that are surrounding that are above 2,000 square feet, and their lots are 6,000 square feet. So the 2 homes immediately adjacent are, as mentioned, 762, 1547, and mine that's 1,700 square feet. There is a market for homes that are reasonably sized. I don't understand the number of variances and the extent of the variances that he is requesting is hard for me to understand because there is a market for smaller homes. I asked the Zoning Board of Appeals to deny Mr. James' current application for zoning relief. I am not opposed to a home on this property. I want to make that very clear, and I made that clear at the meeting that night. I am opposed to a property of this size or a home of this size on this property for the various reasons that have been mentioned this evening. Thank you.
I appreciate that last point because it was suggested earlier that no proposal would be supported by the neighbors. So I appreciate you articulating that last point, that the neighborhood is not necessarily just looking for this lot to remain green space, but it is perhaps looking for a smaller size house, is what I'm understanding from you. Is that correct?
That is correct, and I won't speak for other people.
Thank you.
But yes.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm sorry. You've been here too. I'm Mark Newman. I live at 2833 Hartzell. I live across the street. I've been there for 35 years. I'm going to make this real brief. The real key here is fit. And I'm going to suggest to you that this hasn't been built on because it's not really economically feasible to build a house to make the profit that's being talked about on this small lot. That's why nobody's done it. That's why it's the only one. That's why even Mr. James says the property is a lot that is legal and non-conforming due to lot area and lot width. These characteristics preclude the use of the lot for a residential dwelling, which is why he wants to get all these variances. And I think that's a problem. But many of us have talked about exactly what you're looking at, and that's a smaller house. A house that would be a starter house for people, which is what we used to have in the area before it got so, it's so expensive. I couldn't afford to live here. I think that's a very important part. I think the hardships he's talking about have nothing to do with the lot. It has to do with his building. And I think that's what's important. I would absolutely support a split level and a 2-bedroom house, something like that. We've talked about how to use this. We don't want it to be a vacant lot. What we prefer is to use it somewhere. We've talked about a tot lot. We've talked about a community garden. And I think if there was a reasonable proposal, that you wouldn't see everybody here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Walsh. I live at 2736 Hartzell, which is one block to the east of the corner of Reese and Hartzell. My family and I have lived in that house for 30 years. We've lived in the Central Street neighborhood for 42 years. I'm a founding member of the Central Street Neighbors Association and the immediate past president, but I don't come tonight on behalf of the Central Street Neighbors Association, but as a resident of the neighborhood who has lived a block to the east. Mr. James said that he has met people walking their dogs past the lot who said it sure would be nice if there's a house here. And I can tell you, in the hundreds of times that I've walked past that corner in 30 years to go to Hardigan's or to go to Harold's Hardware Store or to Mike's Shoe Repair or any of the other stores on Central Street, I've thought to myself, it sure would be nice to have a house here. But then we have the issue of density and height and cheek by jowl proximity to the property lines that Mr. James suggests. He has obviously worked hard with his proposal, and I commend him for his hard work, but this is not the proposal that should be on that lot. I join in the comments of the other neighbors to that effect, and I will end my comments with that. I think that something better can be done for the lot than what is being proposed here tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Kathy Miller, and I live at 2831 Hartzell, directly across the street from the subject property. I am also one of the organizers of the neighborhood, so I feel like we've been mischaracterized in a number of ways. But I want you to know, neighbors who could not be here this evening or could not stay, that you are being heard. We had 28 people who had originally signed petitions, witnessed and dated for the previous short-term owner of the property, and she withdrew 3 hours beforehand. You rescheduled last month. People are still committed to having the right thing on this property. Now, one of the reasons, and I've been a builder also in Wilmette and Winnetka, so I have some of the experience with this too. And when I met the builder, the first thing I said was, this is unfeasible. And while he didn't like hearing that, he made a bad business decision, and it's not our fault. But organized neighbors don't always agree on every design that a builder puts up. We did not have other alternatives when we met. So to say that everyone was opposed to something when you were just given his 3 plans is kind of a mischaracterization. I still have concerns about the building. You have a building in the pictures that on the south side, sits back, but you still have window wells, and they go into towards the other person's property with a very old basement. The house that I would be across from is now going to be built up 3 feet from the sidewalk, one with the step. That's going to be a 58-foot long wall for us. And one of our concerns, and I'm so glad Colleen addressed it, are the trees. But we cannot afford to lose any more trees in North Evanston. So I want to say that our neighbors are organized. Our alderman actually had walked this property in 2015, looked at it, and as Tom said, he took a pass. He knew that it was not a place he would build on. And so if somebody else is making a mistake, doesn't mean that we have to pay for that. So thank you for letting the neighbors be heard, because we stuck it out through all these other testimonies, and we still have a few more people that need to get to have their participation in city government.
Thank you.
My name is Joseph Parody. I reside at 2907 Hartzell Street, kitty corner from the subject property. The purpose and objective of the zoning process is to achieve the right balance between the interests of the property owner, the city of Evanston, and the neighbors. We see this in the process that the city follows, including the notification of neighbors and this public hearing, but also in the rules set forth in Section 638 on standards used to decide on requests for a major variance. In this case, the interests of the applicant are very clear. They are exclusively to maximize the profit on this development. The applicant is not a homeowner wanting to build a larger kitchen or replace a garage with a larger one. The application is from a speculator who purchased a property with well-known restrictions, who wants to make money through an excessive series of major variances. The applicant was not forced to buy this property. He made a bet that he could violate enough rules to make a good profit. This is in direct conflict with Rule 638.12e item 5, as the applicant has shown no public benefit under Section 6363 as required. This is a neighborhood that has not objected to any and all requests for variances and has been supportive of both minor and major variances in the past where those requests were appropriate. This application does not meet the standard of Rule 638.12e item 1, as the proposed building is significantly larger than any other house on that block with a similar lot size. And even the applicant fails to cite any evidence that it will not negatively impact the property values of the neighbors. The zoning rules and the variance process can be summarized as a focus on ensuring that building within the city is both safe and suitable. The zoning rules for setbacks from both the street and the adjoining property are aimed to ensure safety, and the rules for lot coverage and impervious coverage are aimed at ensuring suitability of the proposed development. Any application that shows such blatant disregard for a significant number of the zoning rules is not, quote, in keeping with the intent of the zoning ordinance, end of quote. This application is in direct conflict with Rule 638.12e, items 2 and 7. The requested variations are by no means, quote, limited to the minimum change necessary, end of quote, since a much smaller house would clearly be possible to build on this lot. Per the zoning hearing guidelines, quote, the applicant bears the burden to demonstrate that the proposal meets each of the standards applicable, end of quote. In this case, as I have detailed and as others have detailed, the applicant has not demonstrated that the request meets the standards of Zoning Code 638.12, and I thus respectfully request that the Zoning Board of Appeals rejects this application.
Thank you.
Got to be done here. Dawn Larbalestier, 2627 Lincolnwood Drive. I'm on the Hartsel side, 2 houses down. I agree with what my neighbors, pretty much most of what they said. I think that it would be fine if we built something on the lot that wasn't so big. So, that's it.
Thank you.
Can I just say I agree?
Sure. You got to come up and give us your name and address, though. And we love that kind of comment.
I'm Ann Herder. I live at 2837 Hartsel. I live directly across the street from where the garage would be, and I agree with everything that the neighbors have said.
Great.
Strongly.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. One more?
People didn't sign in. They're not getting check marks.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Clark. I currently live at 2815 Hartsel Street. My wife and I moved into the area in 1976, so we're 40-plus residents of the area, too. Previously, we lived at 2622 Reese. Everything that Dick said about the property being sought after by Mr. Welsh, by the previous owner, and by Mr. James is true. The only way that property is going to be developed is if they control 2624, Mr. Horstein's residence. To my knowledge, Dick isn't about to sell his house right now, but that's the only way it's going to work. I think I'd like to also underline what somebody said before, that every example that Mr. James used basically was in comparison to pre-existing non-conforming problems. And the last thing I'd like to say is something I mentioned in a letter. It just seems to me that Mr. James isn't really asking for variances. The scope of what he's asking for is so large that it's really not a variance. He would like to rewrite city code. And tonight, he also stated that not only that the code needs to be changed, but the area needs to be changed from R1 to R2. You know, all these things, maybe they should happen, maybe they shouldn't. Maybe the variances should be loosened up a little bit, but not to the extent that he wants. And I don't think that a meeting like this is a proper place to make those changes or even to discuss them. Obviously, I am in opposition to this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Helen Madden, 2932 Park Place. I'm a realtor. A house that's 16 feet wide and this tall is going to be top heavy. It's going to be a large trailer. Not enough green space. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Very late evening. My name is Ann Rigoti Clark. I came with him. As longtime residents of the neighborhood, I have to say.
Sorry, what's your address, please?
Pardon me?
Sorry, what's your address, please?
2815 Hartzell.
Oh, thank you.
As longtime residents of the neighborhood, we've seen about everything. But I have to say, I have never seen a group of people like this one come together, and I've never felt the sense of a neighborhood that I do tonight and have recently. And of course, I agree with the vast majority of what's been said. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Last call. Last call. Okay. So I'm going to take a minute to talk to my fellow board members. And it's 11 o'clock, and we certainly allow the applicant a chance to respond to all of the comments that have been made and to answer all those sorts of things. So my guess is this is going to continue for a while. Do we want to just go ahead and continue this to a date certain?
To what?
A date certain, meaning pick another date.
So are you suggesting that then we would give on a future date, as is our protocol, to allow the applicant to respond at a future date?
Yes, because we will not have closed the record.
Okay, and then we would deliberate on that future date.
Yes.
And then if other board members are present on that future date that weren't present here, then it would be their role to read the record, read all testimony, and then they would be voting as well.
Yes,
Is that correct?
That's correct.
I would support that.
So I want to know if other residents or the people that said they would come to a continuance would be allowed at that future date.
Sure, because we're not closing the record. So yes, if additional residents show up, we will listen to them as well.
Then I'd be in support of extending this to a future date as well.
Okay.
I support that.
You on board? Okay. Can I have a motion? Oh, what are we doing about a date? So Melissa was looking, she was just trying to noodle through what that next meeting looks like for us.
So I'm estimating we have 3 cases for our next meeting, which is January 23rd, and I'm estimating that altogether those will probably take...
Wait, what?
We have 3 cases currently scheduled for our next meeting. I'm guessing altogether those will take... This was the extra one. But that'll probably take 2.5 hours, I'm going to guess.
Are they special use?
1 special use, 2 variation cases.
2.5's brutal. We can't, because we're going to start with this, right? That's the good news,
This would
too.
be the first case.
You guys get to start.
Let's just meet next week.
Assuming we can get people.
What's, so you're suggesting?
The 16th.
Is there a notice period for continuation required?
No.
No, it's a date certain.
So then would we just discuss this case on
Yes.
the 16th?
Yes.
Tie this case up.
Yes. I am available.
But I say unless all
5.
5 of us can commit to being there,
Right.
we don't pick that date.
I agree.
I can do it.
Let's not lose our current
Momentum.
board. Carol, can you make
Which one is
The
the
16th.
date?
The 16th. I am available. Oh,
This month.
February. Sorry, January. Good Lord.
Next week.
Next week, yes. 7 days. Oh, okay. So because, so what would happen at that meeting is we would allow additional neighborhood comment if they wanted. Then we would allow the applicant, to rebut, come up with other evidence, all that sort of stuff, answer your questions, all that good stuff. We would potentially have questions for the applicant as well. And then at that point, we would close the record, and then we would deliberate and make a decision. Yes, it's part of the record.
It was not. It was submitted just at the end of the business day today. So it and anything else submitted tonight will be uploaded as additional information right next to the packet link.
The meeting also, I don't know how fast they do it, but the meeting gets posted to YouTube. There can't be, all you people can't know that because there's only like 4 people that watch them every month. But
And they are our fans. We love you. Yes, sir. Would you mind coming to yeah. We like to have things recorded.
I was
Public
just wondering
meeting and all.
about the continuance and new comments by neighbors. Would
Yeah.
only additional neighbors be allowed to speak, or could the same neighbors who gave evidence, could they be able to speak again?
It would be new neighbors.
Okay.
I don't think it's, So we would try to limit that to new neighbors, again, in the interest of going forward
All right, thank you.
and moving in a timely manner.
And at this new meeting, Mary Beth, it would be just this case.
Just this case,
Okay.
all 3 hours of
I'm
it.
okay with the 16th.
Yeah,
I'm
I
good
think
with the
that can
16th.
work.
Works for everybody?
all right, great. I make a motion that we end this meeting, continue this case, and that we call a special meeting to finish this case for January 16th at 7 p.m.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, with that, we are moving on. Thanks all for coming. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
What else is on our agenda for tonight? Nothing. Awesome. Can I have a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.